A young man with black hair stood and pondered what would happen if he could start over in the face of a hopeless situation. What choices would he make and how would his life turn out? The young man stood in the barn with a large knife, and at his feet lay a blindfolded cow, perhaps to prevent her from seeing her fate prematurely. It was unclear why the young man decided to take this step when he loved his cows so much. A man and an elderly woman stood watching, discussing the incomprehensible thoughts running through the boy's mind. Did they really want to slaughter their own cows? What a waste, considering how much the young man cherished them. It was completely baffling what had come over the boy today. He had already raised the knife to the cow's head. He seemed to have gone mad, holding the knife above with a calm and resolute face, ready to strike. But something stopped him. The girl flicked her lighter and lit a cigarette, which began to smolder slowly, filling her lungs with the smoke of tobacco. The young man turned around and glared at her angrily, as if she were the main problem and the cause of all his troubles. And the cause of his troubles turned out to be a beautiful girl in a lovely blue miniskirt and a black top that barely covered her shoulders, revealing the sexy straps of her black bra. The girl continued to blow out cigarette smoke and, pointing the cigarette in his direction, started talking to the boy, saying that they should pretend yesterday was just a joke. Even if the boy carried out his plans with his cows, and even if he gave her $100,000 as a dowry, she still wouldn't marry him, and he shouldn't dream about it. The young man looked at the girl's beautiful blue nails and the smoldering cigarette, which burned like his love. The girl kept telling him that he wouldn't succeed, that her younger brother had already promised her $200,000 as a wedding gift, along with a car. And if the boy were left without his cattle, what would he do? She suggested burying that thought and forgetting about it. It was easy for her to say, but what if the boy's feelings were genuinely strong? The man who stood and observed this was surprised that the boy wanted to do this because of the girl, and called him a fool. She wasn't worth it. The grandmother supported the man, saying that there were many unmarried girls in the village, and he should find another bride. But the boy didn't want to listen to anyone. He was determined and ready to do anything for his love. He turned to the people and asked if they were finished gossiping, and if so, they should leave and not waste his time. The girl flicked her cigarette and ostentatiously began to walk away, telling the boy that she wanted to help make things better. But he didn't appreciate her kindness at all. The young man turned around to savor her beauty once more, watching as the girl distanced herself, while a man and a woman approached him, apparently to talk. Someone called out to our hero and he turned eagerly, not expecting to see the person who called him. It was his parents who called out to him, and they were not impressed with what he was about to do. His father told him that if he had problems, he should talk about them, and his mother begged him to put down the knife and not do anything foolish. The young man's hands relaxed and dropped, and he seemed to realize the foolishness he would have committed if it weren't for his parents. They were able to calm him down, and perhaps the pain would fade away for a while. The young man approached his parents, hugged them tightly, and expressed how happy and relieved he was that they were alive and well. Well, it seemed that even the parents themselves didn't understand what danger they had been in. A fat, bald man watched this scene with a malicious grin, asking the family if he had accidentally stumbled upon a TV show. No one paid him any attention, and the young man, with a confident face, began to assure his parents that this time he would definitely protect them from anything. He started shouting for the whole street to hear that no harm would come to his parents, and he would also protect his older brother and sister. Mom was extremely worried about her son, not understanding what was happening to him. She looked at him with teary eyes and tried to figure out how she could help her son. Father's face was completely covered in sweat from anxiety, and he wiped it with a white towel he had on his shoulders. He didn't understand what harm his son was talking about or what was threatening them. The son lowered his head to the ground and began to convince his parents that he hadn't gone crazy and that they needed to deal with those cows to prevent any harm. What kind of harm was supposed to happen? What was the reason behind his actions? He couldn't explain. He looked at his parents and asked them to trust him for once in their lives and do as he asked if they truly loved and respected him. The parents looked at each other and understood each other without words. Father approached his son, exhaling nervously, while the mother raised her hand and started saying something to her son. Father bent down to the ground and picked up a knife, saying, "I don't know what you have in mind, son." And the father walked towards the cows, talking to his son, mentioning that he was a university student, which meant he was smart and had much more knowledge than them, and that he understood something. The son looked at his father with a hint of trust and couldn't even imagine what would happen next. And a second later, the father raised the knife up with his right hand while embracing his son with his left hand, completely unaware of what was happening. After all, the father had never acted so strangely before, nor had he ever supported his son to this extent in his endeavors. The woman let out a heavy sigh and watched as her son and husband walked away. She realized that she couldn't do anything about it, and they would do as they saw fit. That very grandmother who had tried to reason with the young man spoke to the mother of the family, urging her to enlighten her family since the father and son couldn't go crazy together. The mother glared at the old woman and told her that she was the one who had gone mad and shouldn't meddle in her family's affairs. The family reunited, and the mother also decided to support her husband and son, disregarding public opinion. It was the right and sensible decision. People continued to discuss the family behind their backs. Apparently, they had no problems of their own and were mostly interested in the problems of this family. They were very eager to know why this family had gone mad and understood the girl who had left the boy. After all, who would want a lunatic as their husband? The boy unlocked his phone screen and saw that it was already 17 minutes past 3, which didn't please him. He realized that time was running out. He looked at the cows in the pens, already understanding their fate, and told himself that he had less than 4 hours left, and he needed to hurry. The boy raised his hand and loudly shouted that he needed 3 people to help him slaughter the cows. He hoped for a prompt response. The people he called out to didn't pay attention, but as soon as he mentioned money, their eyes lit up. They were ready to do anything for money. They started running towards the boy, tripping over each other and boasting about who was better. Each of them wanted to earn money and show that they were superior. 2 boys stood out in particular, one with white hair who claimed to be strong and capable, and another with dark hair who assured our hero that he was the best choice. Our hero didn't care who would help him. The main thing was to get the mission done quickly and without any trouble. He pondered for a moment and raised a finger to make his choice. He chose those very impulsive boys. They looked at each other, and a spark of rivalry ignited between them. And the chubby boy standing behind them, who hadn't drawn much attention, was also given a chance to earn some money. Nervously twirling the phone in his hand, our hero watched as his parents and the 3 boys who wanted to earn money dealt with the first cow. He felt sorry for the animal, of course, but time was ticking, and he had no other choice. He took the phone and pressed a peculiar button. His fingers trembled with excitement, causing him to barely hit the screen. It turned out that someone had called him, or he had called someone, but it was somewhat unclear. He was asked if he could sell everything for cash, to which our hero replied affirmatively, saying that it was very urgent, and if the buyer was genuinely interested, he could sell everything at half price. He mentioned that if they took everything at once, he could give them an additional discount. Apparently, he was in a dire situation since he almost begged the person to buy something from him. The car was driving through the city, raising dust in its wake. In the trunk, there was a bundle wrapped in blue fabric and tied with ropes to prevent it from falling apart. A red bag with white and blue stripes fell to the ground with a thud. He was ready. He had no choice. The young man stood there, counting the red bills, known as money, and deeply lost in thought. His parents tried to ask him something, but he didn't react at all. He was too absorbed in his own thoughts. With a very sad face, his mother told him that she had done everything as he had asked, and their family had incurred losses in tens of thousands. She didn't understand if such losses were justified. The son unzipped the bag, revealing the stack of red bills. There were too many of them. He ran his fingers through them, assuring his father and mother that the risk was justified, and they would soon understand everything. He slung the bag over his shoulder and approached the car. He asked his relatives to hurry back home and not to show themselves until he returned. He instructed them not to open the door for anyone and not to leave the premises. These were the last instructions he gave to his parents. His parents looked at him, tears welling up in their eyes. They believed in their son wholeheartedly, but they couldn't even imagine what he had planned. Their worry had no bounds. The mother remained silent, while the father told his son that he had never been wrong before and that he would succeed no matter what. The young man opened the car door and threw the bag full of money inside. His parents murmured something behind him, but they spoke very quietly, and our hero could only hear that they trusted him very much, but could only support him at the moment. The son sat behind the wheel and closed the door, ordering his parents to trust him, lock the gates, doors, and windows, and not to venture outside. He repeated this for the 10th time, but he was extremely worried about his parents, so he would repeat it 100 times if necessary. The car sped off, and on the clock, it was already 11 minutes past 5. Our hero was deeply afraid of being late. From the bridge he was driving on, he saw his city for the last time. But he was not interested in it anymore. His thoughts were consumed with where to stock up on weapons, medicine, and ammunition. How many months' worth of grain supplies did they have in the cellar? He drove the car with one hand, the other resting on the armrest. His gaze was contemplative, and he knew that true chaos would begin in 2 hours. Now, it was up to us to understand what this chaos entailed, and here is what it entails. Suddenly, all animals, including livestock, mutate for no apparent reason. They become vicious and bloodthirsty, attacking humans. Those bitten by the animals start experiencing the same symptoms as the animals. And in this madness, people will lose their sense of pain and only crave flesh. If you get bitten or scratched, infection is inevitable. As a result, over the next month, more than half of the Earth will become infected. They will be everywhere, and within a year, fewer than 1 million people will be left alive. It's hard to imagine since the Earth's population is 8 billion, and within a month, it will shrink to 1 million. Our hero remembers how, in his previous life, he panicked when faced with this situation and couldn't save his mother, brother, sister, or father. That's what it all comes down to. Our hero has arrived from the future to correct the mistakes of his past. He didn't intentionally arrive in the past, but since he has a chance to fix everything, why not give it a try? I think every person has dreamed of going back in time and correcting something. The car continued to speed through the city as our hero contemplated preventing the tragedy from happening again and saving as many people as possible. With all the money he earned from selling cows and his other belongings, he bought various items in the city. More specifically, a diesel generator and a fuel reserve. He purchased all sorts of cables, flashlights, ropes, batteries, chainsaws, axes, shovels, and other defensive tools. He also bought a large quantity of emergency medicine, painkillers, antibiotics, and gauze bandages. These were the things he took the most. Lastly, he left the most important purchase for the end. He went to a factory with huge production pipes. At this factory, he intended to buy gunpowder. With his bag, he tried to enter a certain door and realized that if he managed to buy gunpowder, they would soon be able to seize the initiative in the early stages of chaos with firepower. He eventually managed to enter the room where a man was sitting on a chair, crossing his legs, and next to him stood an elegant girl who was likely his secretary. Their faces were in shadow, and the room was too dark to make out their features. But the man's face illuminated, and he clasped his hands under his chin, addressing our hero, saying that the security checkpoint had already informed him, presumably upon seeing the large bag on the young man's shoulder, and asked if he came for a major deal or just casually. Perhaps he was just the secretary's friend. Upon hearing these words, the secretary blushed and looked down. The young man slammed the bag on the table, making a loud noise, thereby showing the seriousness of his intentions and making it clear that he had not come here to joke around. He gave a stern look to the man and confronted him. Our hero had come to discuss matters, and after a long pause, he mentioned the man's name. His name was Lin Zhe. He unzipped the bag, revealing stacks of red banknotes. He told the man that inside the bag were 100,000 in cash, showing that he wasn't joking. The man looked at him with an unsatisfied gaze, even with a gaze full of contempt, and questioned the young man again if there really were 100,000 there. Apparently, he found it hard to believe that someone could have such an amount of money. He turned to the secretary, who was already restless, and asked her if she had said anything before. What she said, to whom, and why she said it, he didn't specify. The man burst into laughter. His eyes rolled back and his mouth unnaturally widened. He laughed at our hero, calling him too naive and amusing. In a moment, his face changed, and he grinned maliciously, exposing all 32 of his teeth. He said that Li Qin had mentioned that she wanted a ransom of 100,000, and did the boy really manage to gather the entire amount? The girl called the man sir and said that everything wasn't as he understood. She stated that she had absolutely nothing to do with the young man. Well, our hero shattered all the girl's rosy dreams that she meant something to someone. After a pause, he pointed at the bag of money and told the man that he was giving him the money to buy black powder. The man clasped his hands together, forming a little house. Apparently, it was his favorite hand position. He asked the boy if he was really joking with him. The man said that they had a serious production, and he wouldn't push his product in the wrong direction. After all, it could cost him his life as well as his career. Our hero knew the sore spot he could press. He said that he didn't know about illegal trading, but he knew that in December of last year, a girl in a blue dress died at a forest factory owned by the man. And perhaps she could shed some light on what was going on. The man understood that the boy knew a lot and that he had two options. Either do as he requested or quietly eliminate him. The young man handed over the money and said he would buy the gunpowder. After all, they both had their cards up their sleeves, and it was best not to create a commotion. The man looked at the boy and realized he had no choice. He called for his secretary and asked her if he remembered correctly that they hadn't yet approved the quarterly report. The girl stood there, not understanding what was happening. An economic crime was taking place. The man mentioned that the weather promised to be humid, and who knows what could happen with the gunpowder. He wanted to write off the gunpowder and give it to the boy. That's what he ordered the secretary to do. The girl had no right to refuse and agreed to carry out her boss's orders. Fear filled her mind, the fear that now illegal gunpowder trading was tied to her. Our hero stood confidently, not even turning to look at his beloved as she exited the office. Apparently, she was the least of his worries at the moment. The boy looked at the man and said that Uncle Lee had taken good care of his family and that they were very grateful. The boy said that if anyone was in trouble now, he would definitely help them and made a promise. The girl watched the unfolding events with a sad gaze and couldn't leave the office. I didn't understand her behavior at all, but every woman has her own quirks. Our hero reached out towards the man, who was ready to sell him the gunpowder, seemingly expecting a firm handshake as they bid farewell. But from the man sitting on the chair, with his legs crossed, there was absolutely no response. He had no intention of showing respect to the foolish boy. He simply sat there, lost in thought about something interesting. His eyes glowed with a devilish red color, and his wide smile revealed his devilish grin. He had something in mind, but we would soon find out what it was. There was a very strong wind and the trees swayed, risking breaking. Our hero's car pulled up to the door of a house, and its trunk was full of various things. The hero stepped out of the car, closing the door, realizing that he had arrived just in time. There was half an hour left until the end began, and for now, it was quiet. He slammed the door loudly and started calling for his parents, hoping that they were okay. At first, there was no reaction, but then shouts could be heard from behind the gate. Someone shouted that they were coming to our hero. The gates opened and a young boy peeked out. His expression was not very pleased, and he asked our hero what was wrong with him today. As it turned out, these two boys were brothers. Our hero was delighted to see his older brother, but the older brother was very unhappy that the younger one had sold all their livestock without consulting him. Our hero had no intention of justifying himself to anyone, and his brother was no exception. The boy went to the car, saying that he would explain everything later. He asked where their younger sister was because he missed her so much. To which the older brother replied that the sister had not yet returned. Our hero's breath stopped for a second. His heart beat even faster, and a sharp pain pierced his chest. Could his sister be in danger? How could she still not be home? In his previous life at this time, his sister was already home. Our hero apparently didn't know about the butterfly effect, and this effect was happening right now. Even the slightest changes in the past, and not only in the past, can alter the course of events. Our hero's face became covered in a sticky sweat of fear. The boy swiftly opened the car door without even realizing it, and told his older brother that he would quickly go and get their little sister. He turned to him and shouted that no matter what happened, they should not leave the gates. He said he would fetch their sister and come back. The brother tried to stop him from the open gates, but the car had already rushed forward, leaving behind only plumes of smoke mixed with dust. The older brother, looking at those brown clouds, managed to say only that his brother should return soon and unharmed. The car sped at a tremendous speed across the bridge, illuminated by a beautiful sunset. Our hero held onto the steering wheel tightly, trying to get the maximum out of the car because every second counted. He looked at the road, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He recalled that on the first day, it was the animals that turned into zombies. There were few mutated humans, and the school was located in a city where the danger was much higher than in the village. If his sister was still at school, irreversible things could happen. Our hero promised himself that this time he would not let any of his loved ones die. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't even notice a dog or perhaps a wolf suddenly darting across the road in front of his car. Braking at the very last moment, he still couldn't avoid the collision, and the animal was thrown away from the car. All that remained was a bloody fountain in the air. Our hero hit his head hard on the steering wheel. There would probably be a bump at the point of impact. The car left behind a very long skid mark, and the animal's body was scattered all over the road. Our hero touched the sore spot on his arm and tried to understand what had happened, but then his gaze caught something terrifying. He looked in horror at what was happening on the road. The creature he hit didn't die, but, on the contrary, gained a new life. It was a zombie dog. Everything started much earlier than last time, and our hero realized that he had less and less time, maybe no time left at all. The events take us to the school, where we are about to hear what happened there an hour ago. 3 students sitting at their desks were discussing our hero and couldn't understand how he could do such a thing. How could he sell all the family's livestock for a girl? To the children it seemed very foolish, but they didn't yet understand why he did it and what danger awaited them. The girl raised her phone, saying that it was the #1 news in the whole district. The girl turned back to the girl who was sitting and diligently writing in her notebook. This girl was our hero's sister, who was being severely bullied for what her brother had done. So, the girl who turned to her asked if she was ashamed of her brother. Our hero's sister was a smart girl and understood that there was no point in responding to provocative questions. She simply continued silently writing in her notebook, but her classmates wouldn't calm down. The girl said that the girl for whom the livestock was sold now works at a fireworks factory, and her brother has completely lost his mind, as well as their whole family. Our hero's younger sister, tired of hearing this nonsense, stood up from her desk and was probably ready to leave the classroom. Her classmates continued to taunt her. That same girl showed her a photo of her brother on her phone and said that her parents allow him to do such things. The sister hit the hand of the bold classmate, who continued to say that their family had gone insane and knocked the phone out of her hand. The phone fell to the floor, bouncing several times before stopping and falling. The owner of the phone jumped up and took a fighting stance, apparently preparing to seek revenge for her phone. Our hero's sister headed towards the exit of the classroom, no longer wanting to listen to this nonsense. She had had enough, but that bold classmate didn't intend to let her go and asked where she was going. Someone started picking up the troublemaker girl's phone from the floor. The teacher entered the class, and our hero's sister deliberately began to speak loudly about the phone. She apologized for her carelessness and for dropping the girl's phone. She promised to return the phone to her right away. The teacher looked displeased at the situation. Our hero's country was incredibly smart if she had come up with such a plan. She drew the teacher's attention to the phone, which was prohibited in the school. The teacher said that the school rules state that phones are not allowed, and apparently, the previous confiscation of the phone didn't teach the girl anything. She went to her desk with the phone, telling the girl that she would now report this situation to her father and return the phone only to him. The teacher ordered our hero's sister to return to her seat and not disrupt the lesson. The girl was very pleased that the troublemaker had been punished. She passed by her tormentor, smugly saying that she was sorry that things turned out this way and that she didn't know the teacher would come so early. She knew everything perfectly well, and that was the essence of her plan, but she needed to rub it in the face of her tormentor. The troublemaker girl only made a dissatisfied grimace since she understood that it would be better not to do anything in her situation. Rain drummed on the school roof, trying to play some interesting melody. People opened colorful umbrellas over their heads to avoid getting their work clothes wet. However, these people didn't understand that very soon they might not need those clothes anymore. But retribution apparently came to our hero's sister, and she sat on the floor after hitting her head against the classroom wall. As it's easy to guess, the culprit of this flight was the same troublemaker girl who said that our hero's sister was very brave recently. But now she was suddenly silent. She grabbed her by the hair and tried to lift her up, intending to inflict as much pain as possible. She wanted to hear an explanation from this wimp, or even better, receive an apology. Tears welled up in our hero's sister's eyes. If only she remembered that she was supposed to be on duty with her today, then she wouldn't have done that to her phone. The girl took out a utility knife and extended the blade, probably to scare her, or maybe she really had evil intentions. With one hand, she grabbed our hero's sister by the head, and with the other, she started bringing the knife close, saying that if she remained silent, she would open her mouth herself. Our hero's car raced down the wet street, and he hoped to make it on time. The school was very close, and he kept glancing at the time on the dashboard of his car to always be aware of what was happening. At one moment, behind the wet windshield, he saw something that made him horrified and stunned. People were rushing out of the school, pleading with everyone still inside or near the school to leave quickly and save their lives. Inside the classroom, a utility knife fell to the floor with a distinctive sound, next to a pool of blood. Our hero's sister had a satisfied look in her eyes, and her face was stained with blood. Her tormentor sat on the floor, covering her mouth with her hand. Blood was flowing out, which could stain her pristine white shirt. Apparently, there was so much blood that the girl choked on it and started spitting it out on the floor. Our hero's sister watched her without an ounce of pity or remorse. The tormentor got what she deserved. The girl asked her if everything was all right, although the amount of blood indicated that things were not particularly good. Our hero's sister stood up and started running towards the exit to quickly escape the crime scene. Her tormentor continued to pour blood onto the floor. The girl ran out onto the school balcony and started shouting that there was an injured person inside the school building, bleeding profusely, and that she urgently needed help. But outside, nobody paid attention because the street was filled with people's screams caused by zombies feasting on flesh. The girl looked at this scene, not understanding what was happening. She was facing a danger she couldn't even suspect. If she had turned around, she would have seen a student who had been infected and was eagerly staring at her, seemingly anticipating the taste of her flesh. The zombie lunged at the girl. Just a while ago, it was an ordinary student, but now it was a merciless zombie with demonic red eyes and green skin. It stuck out its tongue towards the girl, ready to include her in its ranks. The girl sat on the floor, and the zombie flew over her, apparently not expecting such a move. She covered her ears with her hands, hoping it would help, and the zombie would leave her alone. At that moment, another zombie, the one who had tried to bite our girl, crashed to the floor with a distinct sound. But that was only half of the problem because the tormentor appeared in the doorway, but now as a zombie. She noticed our hero's sister and her red eye lit up. She couldn't take revenge as a human, so maybe as a zombie, she would exact her full revenge. Our hero's sister didn't understand what was happening and began to step back in fear, begging her classmate not to touch her, as she was still so young. The classmate attempted to touch her with her hands, but the girl shielded her face from the zombie's repulsive hands. But the zombie classmate had no intention of stopping and continued reaching for our hero's sister's eyes with her hands. In a few seconds, something irreversible could happen, and our hero would blame himself for it for the rest of his life. The school building was filled with rain, and the sounds of wild screams of fear and hatred echoed from within. Our hero's sister was saved by her brother, who managed to kick away the zombie classmate at a distance with a well-timed kick. The girl was in complete shock from what was happening, and her brother's unexpected appearance shocked her even more. But the zombies were not giving up. They were gathering strength for a new attack. Our hero tightly gripped a machete in his hand, offering the zombies a peaceful retreat or a dismemberment. The zombies chose the second option, and one of them headed towards our heroes. As promised, its head ended up separate from its body. With a swift motion of his hand, or more precisely, the machete, our hero severed its head. The brother looked at his sister with a gaze full of love and understanding. He knew he had made it in time. He said he came to make fun of his sister and save her. The girl blushed deeply and didn't say anything in response to her brother, tears welling up in her eyes. Outside, undeterred by the rainy weather, the zombies continued to roam and search for their victims. The unstoppable process had been set in motion. The weather outside was not improving, but fortunately, it was not getting worse either. The pouring rain continued unabated. On the road lay the body of a girl in a pool of blood, being gnawed on by a zombie. At one moment, the zombie was distracted from its engrossing activity and noticed a car approaching from behind. It decided not to run, a decision it would regret within seconds. Whether zombies are capable of regret remains unknown, but the car hit it from behind, sending it flying through the air. Only bloody traces remained in the air and on the bumper. The girl sat in the front seat, buckled up, and absent-mindedly tried to wipe the blood off the window. Of course, it was impossible since the blood was on the outside, but the girl was so lost in her thoughts that it didn't matter to her. Suddenly, she looked at her brother and started shouting with joy. She drew attention to herself to ask her brother a question. With her innocent face, she asked her brother if all this resembled a zombie game and if it was all real. And the kick he used at school seemed like a superhero's strike. The girl was propelled far away from the impact of the kick. This question infuriated her brother because how could his sister compare a genuinely life-threatening situation to some game? Without taking his eyes off the road, He told his sister to stop asking silly questions, and if she was scared, she should just cry. He would understand and wouldn't laugh at her. The girl fell silent and didn't reply to her brother. Or rather, she didn't know what to say to him, as he had recently saved her. The car traveled the same road as in the morning, but now the world's situation was completely different. How quickly life can change. The brother started talking to his sister and told her that with each passing minute, there were more and more zombies devouring people in the world, and they needed to learn to adapt to it and to keep on living no matter what. He lovingly looked at his sister and assured her not to worry because he would always be by her side to protect her. Their family would be safe and everything would be fine. He made that promise to his sister. The sister smiled radiantly, closing her eyes with joy, and she was glowing as she said she believed her brother. Night fell, and the full moon sparkled in the sky. The city was still awake, and many windows were lit. It makes you wonder if everyone already knows what is happening. Our heroes knocked on the gate, and a frightened family opened it for them. The parents were overjoyed that their son and daughter had returned unharmed. Our hero looked at his parents with a weary gaze and asked them if everything was calm and if nothing happened while he was away. To which the mother, embracing her daughter, said they had recently heard screams outside, but she and her father hadn't dared to go out. Now everything seemed quiet. Our hero pondered and diverted his gaze from his parents to immerse himself in his thoughts. He remembered that in his previous life in the village, there were very few people left, and the mutated ones feared the sunlight. So, they had enough time to prepare defenses for now. But their main task remained to survive the night. Our hero's older brother asked why he had bought so many things, but then he realized that it all seemed like a disaster. Closing the car door, our hero told his older brother that all explanations would come later. And for now, all the men in the family should help carry everything from the pickup truck into the house. And they should hurry, because the main phase of zombie activity was about to begin. Our hero showed the machete strapped to his belt to his relatives and told them that no matter what happened, they must guard the house. He would be away for a short time and would return soon. The mother was deeply worried about her son, and her expression changed instantly. She didn't want to let him go, but her daughter insisted that the mother shouldn't interfere because they needed to listen to their brother since he was able to foresee this catastrophe. The sister, it seemed to me, began to suspect something, but she didn't show it. Perhaps she was the only one who understood that her brother was behaving differently than usual. Memories from school started coming back to the guy, and he realized that his sister's intuition was not lying. His body behaved differently at school, and now was the perfect time to test it. Our hero was leaping across moonlit rooftops. He believed that amidst all this chaos, he should find someone with the same abilities as his previous life. That would give them an advantage and increase their chances of survival. A grand mansion illuminated by the moon was shown to us, where someone was shouting that they couldn't take it anymore. Some people, seemingly insane, were banging on the windows of the house. Behind those windows stood a beautiful, long-haired girl, trying to hold back the onslaught of these people. She screamed that they needed to hurry, and she knew they were worried about their loved ones. But the zombies were about to break through. The girl was right, and a glass shattered near her face, revealing an inhuman hand emerging from the hole. Two men armed with wooden clubs stood there, waving them and saying they found weapons, warning the stranger to leave. The girl stepped away from the glass and decided to leave all these questions to the guys who were already prepared. Suddenly, fear flashed in her eyes as she looked towards the wall she had just left. The wall collapsed, and hordes of bloodthirsty zombies poured out from behind it. The guys stood there, watching everything in complete shock, paralyzed, and with diminished chances of survival. One of the zombies fell to the ground, apparently breaking its neck upon impact, as the fall was accompanied by a distinct crunch. After that fall, the zombie didn't get up anymore. The girl turned around to look at the zombie, making sure it would no longer pose a threat to anyone. She looked towards the wall and couldn't understand how such a thing had happened. The zombies that were supposed to tear them apart suddenly turned out to be dead and no longer posed any danger. The reason for this turned out to be our hero, who climbed over the zombie corpses with his faithful cleaver. The men looked at him, their mouths agape with surprise. It was the same fool who sold the cows for the girl. The man with glasses even adjusted his glasses to get a better look at him. Our hero gave the girl an angry glare, as if he wanted to incinerate her. The girl widened her eyes, not understanding what was happening. The guy scared her a lot. Another moment, and the girl would have been dead, but her life was saved by our hero, who swiftly reacted and decapitated the zombie that threatened her life. In one swift motion of his cleaver, he sent the zombie's head flying, and blood fountains scattered across the room. The girl squinted in surprise, trying to remember her hero's name. The guy grabbed her face as if he wanted to kiss her and answered her question with his gaze. He squeezed her cheeks and, upon closer inspection, realized that she was the same girl whose body was not infected, and she could be useful to him. The girl resisted such treatment and didn't understand what the guy wanted from her. And the guy remembered that in his previous life, this girl was Sia Binbin, a ruthless zombie destroyer with a massive rifle. Now she looked nothing like herself, and that needed to be corrected. Terrified, the girl recoiled from the guy, thinking he was a pervert and that something bad would happen to her. Out of politeness, the guy asked if she had any wounds or scratches and if she had been bitten by any zombies. The girl replied that no one had bitten her and she didn't need any help. An elderly man watched our hero, not understanding what was happening. He was completely different from himself. The guy with glasses grabbed a bat and stood up in defense of the girl. He told our hero that if he had any grievances, they could discuss them. But resorting to violence, especially against women, was unnecessary. The guy stood up and closed his eyes thoughtfully, saying that he had killed Uncle Nu and Brother Juan. Well, as he explained, he didn't kill them. After all, he killed zombies. It's hard to believe and hard to understand, but they were no longer human. They had all turned into zombies. If zombie blood gets into your bloodstream, you'll immediately become like them, with no chance of a cure. The guy in glasses began yelling at our hero and telling him not to mess with their heads because zombies don't exist, and it's something from comics. The man in glasses noticed a body lying in a pool of blood and said that our hero had just killed Zhang. His granddaughter didn't come back from school today, and his wife isn't responding. Could they all be? Before finishing his sentence, the man fell silent. All the men in the building looked at each other, and the eldest among them suggested calling the police. Our hero said that there's no point in calling the police if they won't be able to help. Moreover, most likely many policemen have already turned into zombies. Suddenly, someone clapped loudly and asked everyone to pay attention to him. It was the gunpowder seller with his signature hand gesture. He talked about not trusting a killer. He stood among the crowd, with his loyal secretary standing behind him. He said that this boy has taken a dozen lives and now claims that the police won't help. All the people began raising their hands, chanting that he needs to be caught and that he's a murderer who should be punished. Our hero stood in shock, watching all of this, realizing that he couldn't overcome such a large number of people, and if they wanted to capture him, they would definitely succeed. The gunpowder seller stood there, telling our hero that he wouldn't be able to explain the existence of zombies and justify his actions. The townspeople chanted to tie him up, saying that a killer has no place here, and the village authorities will decide for the residents. Well, the girl whom our hero saved tried to stop this chaos. She asked everyone to stop and listen to her. The girl placed her hand on her heart, perhaps to make her words sound sincere. She said that their committee would help everyone, and the criminals wouldn't go unpunished. But the guy with the sash is absolutely right. Angry villagers attacked them, and he had no other choice. Our hero wasn't completely satisfied with this outcome, but he could at least thank the girl for trying to do something to justify him. The guy shrugged his hands towards the crowd and said that he would prove to everyone that it's a zombie and that he seems to have an idea where the family members of all these people are. People stood there looking at each other, not fully trusting the guy. And he said that anyone who would go with him would believe his words. The guy looked at the gunpowder seller and told him to come with him. After all, Lindsay doubts him. Our hero can show him everything. The gunpowder seller nervously adjusted his tie, apparently deciding to take this scary step. The eyes of Lindsay were filled with contemplation. He believed that this guy was too suspicious. Earlier in the day, he had stocked up on a large quantity of supplies and gunpowder, and in the evening, all these strange things started happening. Whatever the case may be, if our hero knows about the incident with the girl in the woods, he must take that secret to the grave. Our hero stood there, spreading his arms, continuing to convince people that zombies exist. He said that in the village, a bunch of people disappeared out of nowhere, and the place is very remote, surrounded by forests. The guy approached the gunpowder vendor closely and kept pressuring him. If the gunpowder vendor considered him a killer and believed that zombies don't exist, then it wouldn't cost him anything to go with him. Or did he actually get scared? Lindsay continued to make excuses. He said that he was just an ordinary person from the common folk and feared such a cruel killer like our hero. They stood there, looking at each other, while the gunpowder vendor continued to speak. He couldn't disgrace himself in front of the people and said that for the safety of the village residents and to determine the whereabouts of their missing relatives, he was obligated to go with him. But he would bring a couple of trusted individuals with him. He said these words and smirked, showing his gang of thugs standing behind him. The girl our hero saved, sensing that the gunpowder vendor had something bad in mind, decided to go with them. However, her friends didn't think the same way. A man in a white shirt said that it was too dangerous, and the guy with glasses said that they shouldn't act rashly until they figure out what's going on. The girl looked at the men with disdain and said that since they were members of the village committee, they were obligated to take the initiative if the village secretary wasn't with them. The guy observed the situation from the sidelines and out of curiosity asked where the secretary had gone. As it turned out, today, after lunch, when news started coming in about the missing villagers, the secretary went out to search for them and never returned. The guy with glasses lowered his gaze to the floor and said that his wife had also disappeared, and there had been no news from her for a long time. Our hero contemplated something, realizing that his suspicions were correct and that there were already a lot of zombies in the village, and the zombies that made it into this house were just a small part of the whole problem. The guy with glasses gathered his courage and said that he would also go with them because they had to fulfill the duties of the secretary in his absence. The man looked at our hero, apparently sensing trust in him, and said that they needed to carefully investigate everything. An elderly man also decided not to stay on the sidelines and said that he would help them. He would provide a place for the people in this building. He suggested using 2 vans at the entrance to reach their destination. The events moved to the forest, where the entire group of people who didn't believe in our hero was inspecting a white car. The girl examined the car with a flashlight and realized that it closely resembled the secretary's car. The elderly man touched the hood with his hand and, based on its temperature, understood that the engine had been turned off recently, which means that the secretary was somewhere nearby. The young man with glasses tried to call the secretary, but the phone was unreachable. Once again, our hero immersed himself in memories from the past, realizing that the previous wave of zombies started 3 days later, and they were heading in this direction. Back then, there was no opportunity to investigate the source of that horde. If the timing coincides with the past, they would be able to solve the problem of that horde now. But his main task was to gain the trust of the girl, who could greatly help him in the future. The guy told everyone that they were in the right place and that they now needed to venture deeper into the forest and be observant. The group of people started searching, combing through the entire forest in search of the secretary. From a bird's eye view, the flashlights they were using to illuminate the forest were visible. The girl walked ahead, shining her flashlight in front of her. The forest was too dense, and the heroes moved forward for a long time, but didn't encounter anyone. Their spirits began to drop, and it affected everyone. Well, not for our hero. He stopped and said that not long ago, there were many people in this forest. He had seen traces on the grass, broken branches, and bloodstains. All of this indicated that zombies had been here very recently. It was a typical zombie movie plot, but this was only the first day of the apocalypse, and everything was happening too fast. There had to be a reason for it. Our hero stood at the entrance of a cave, shining his flashlight deep into it. He stopped the people following him and told them that there was a cave ahead, but it was too dangerous for everyone to enter together. He would go first to check it out, but the gunpowder vendor stopped our hero. He looked at him skeptically and said something very interesting. What if there was a crime scene inside the cave, and our hero wanted to go alone to cover his tracks? A pause fell over the crowd, and everyone stood silently, shining their flashlights into emptiness. Our hero let out a frustrated sigh, expressing his anger at the behavior of the gunpowder vendor. He said that he resembled a cowardly little dog that didn't trust its owner. With a look of hatred and disrespect, our hero stared at the gunpowder vendor and offered him to come along if he wasn't afraid of death. He hoped to see a mountain of corpses inside the cave. Lindsay understood that the guy wasn't joking, and thoughts began to creep into his mind that the guy really intended to kill him. It only made things more interesting and intrigued him. The gunpowder vendor looked at our hero within the walls of the cave, genuinely curious about what this cave concealed and how our hero was connected to it. Just a few minutes passed when a zombie hand protruded from the cave. A zombie girl in a ballet dress moved towards the people standing at the entrance of the cave. The guy with glasses looked at her and recognized his wife, although she was no longer the same. The girl approached the guy with glasses, and he, in turn, pushed the baseball bat back to tightly embrace his wife. He asked her how she ended up there and told her how he had been trying to reach her for half a day and was very worried. Our hero shouted at him not to approach her, let alone touch her. Well, it was too late, and the wife of the guy with glasses had already opened her lifeless mouth and was ready to devour him. Our hero, as always, reacted lightning fast, and instead of his husband's neck, the zombie wife bit into his blade. Our hero told the man that his wife would never be the same again and that he'd better stay away from her. In front of the guy with glasses' eyes, our hero destroyed his wife. There was nothing else he could do. How could he explain this to a loving husband? The man with glasses looked at all of this, and tears welled up in his eyes. The person he loved so much lay on the ground lifeless. His life had ended now. The shock passed, and the man called our hero a ruthless killer and begged him to return his wife. Well, he didn't understand that this killing was done for the better. Everyone looked at the grieving husband and sympathized with him. No one would want to feel what he was feeling right now. The man in glasses grabbed a bat and swung it at our hero, seeking revenge for his wife. Our hero was not that simple, and with a single blow, he sent the husband to the ground. How could he not understand that his wife was a zombie and there was no other choice? The man lost his glasses and lay on the ground, listening to our hero's words about how it's normal to get angry, feel hurt, and have regrets. No matter how he felt, it didn't change the fact that the woman had become a zombie and our hero had to kill her. Blood dripped from our hero's machete, and with each passing second, the chances of many people surviving grew slimmer. Our hero could only hope that those who were still alive had not perished. The man in glasses refused to back down, and striking the ground with his hand, said that our hero was talking nonsense and such a thing couldn't happen. His wife was his loved one, and she couldn't become a zombie. Our hero would have spoken to him differently if the man in glasses had killed his loved one before his eyes. Memories resurfaced in our hero's mind. His family lay on the ground in a pool of blood. It was the most terrifying memory of his life. He asked the man in glasses what he had just said, but not hearing a response, he turned away. He grabbed the man by the throat, lifting him into the air, apparently wanting to strangle him or simply teach him a lesson. He asked the man if he had been too polite with him and perhaps he should be tougher. Our hero himself expressed a desire to take them there to dispel doubts and even saved the man's life, and now he was receiving such gratitude from him. It irritated him greatly. The man hanging in the air began to suffocate. Our hero told everyone that anyone who dared to harm his family, even with a finger, would be immediately killed. Friends of the man in glasses rushed to his aid, telling our hero to let him go. The gunpowder seller started telling everyone that he was right and that our hero was indeed a ruthless killer, and there were no zombies. But suddenly, our hero's brother jumped towards him and tried to save the man from the hands of his own kin. He ordered his younger brother, with cries, to calm down and be gentler. The older brother was not left with any options, so he forcefully hit his brother's head with his own. The man in glasses finally fell to the ground, finally able to breathe fresh air. His life was saved. The older brother sat beside the lifeless body of his restless younger brother and began to stand up. Our hero regained consciousness and recognized his tormentor in the face of his brother. The older brother looked at him with a look of admiration and called him a fool. But he was glad that he had regained his senses. He extended his hand to his younger brother and said that he was not supposed to be home, and everyone was getting worried. The man in glasses continued to cry on the ground, blaming himself for his wife's death, for not being able to protect her. The older brother of our hero approached the grieving husband, trying to cheer him up. He said that even though he didn't want to admit it, deep down he understood that his wife couldn't be brought back. Although his brother was a fool, he had saved the man's life. The man's feelings were, of course, understandable, and the brother offered to hate him instead of our hero. He extended his hand to the man in glasses and said that they had to keep living and that he was needed by the villagers. The man started to get up, saying that he had to save the people in his village. Our hero looked at the whole scene and understood that his older brother, despite being different, was always ready to come to his aid and bring comfort. Although they were brothers, their characters were different. The older brother had always been popular, while our hero never had any friends. No matter what happened, the brother was always there, protecting and helping our hero. Our hero approached his brother and the grieving man and hit his brother on the shoulder for no apparent reason. He began to walk away, mentally telling his brother that it was his time to protect. From the cave, a wild scream could be heard, indicating that not all zombies had left. The girl, upon hearing the voice, immediately recognized its owner. It was the voice of the secretary who urgently needed help. She was about to rush to assist when our hero blocked her path, telling her not to act rashly. Strange sounds continued to emanate from the cave. The ward of the gunpowder seller stated that it was true. There were zombies, and that the girl was indeed a zombie. To this, his owner said it was all nonsense, and that he would go there to prove that there were no zombies. However, one of the brutes stepped forward, apparently trying to impress his owner, and said he would go into the cave. The man entered the cave and started shouting at the one who was supposedly playing pranks, telling them to come out and stop scaring people. Suddenly, his flashlight slipped from his hands, and the man disappeared from sight. Everyone was bewildered and didn't understand what had happened. Perhaps only our hero understood what was going on. Inside the cave, only the lower half of the man's body remained. The upper half of the man's body was held by a zombie, surrounded by a massive crowd of its kind. Those who didn't believe our hero could now see with their own eyes that he was right. Glava 6. The zombie stood and held the upper part of the minion's body by the head. It was a very terrifying sight. Nobody wanted to look at it. After a couple of seconds, the zombie threw the upper part of the body onto the street, and everyone present there was very frightened. The gunpowder seller didn't understand what was happening, and fear appeared on his face. Nobody understood what was happening, and the zombies, in the meantime, rushed towards the people. Our hero looked at the crowd of zombies and couldn't understand why there were so many of them. He thought there would be fewer, and he already wanted to run away. But he realized that his brother and the girl who mattered to him would stay here. Running away was not an option. He shielded the girl and told her to stand behind him because it was the safest thing she could do right now. Someone grabbed him from behind by the shoulder. It was his brother, who frightened our hero greatly. The two brothers scattered the zombies in different directions, helping each other and complimenting each other very well. The older brother looked at our hero and was deeply hurt that he wanted to take all the glory of victory for himself. Real brothers don't do that. Real brothers always share. The zombies began to rise from the ground to continue fighting and destroy the human race. Our hero's brother was very unhappy that even after his attacks, the zombies could still stand up. He didn't understand their weaknesses and how to defeat them. Our hero looked at his older brother and reminded him that the weak spot of the zombies was their brain, as well as sunlight. The older brother completely lost his grip and forgot such elementary things. The two brothers stood side by side, with the girl standing between them. The older brother said that he would definitely have enough strength to defeat the zombies, and he didn't need any special methods to defeat them. Our hero said that in that case, they would act in an old-fashioned way. The girl looked at the two brave guys with astonishment as they decided to destroy the horde of zombies with their bare hands, without anyone's help. The two brothers stood and discussed the plan of action. The older brother intended to fight the zombies in hand-to-hand combat, while the younger one had a machete, making it much easier for him to destroy the zombies. The zombies glowed with their red eyes and opened their foul-smelling mouths, apparently wanting to bite our heroes, although it was clear that it was their only desire. Our hero's older brother commanded him to attack and rushed forward. Our hero flew down from the air towards the zombies, while the older brother attacked the zombies on the ground. Blood was flying everywhere, as well as zombie heads that were being severed by the machete. The zombies seemed as if they were not going to give up and wanted to continue fighting, expressing it with their angry growls. But the older brother of our hero stopped that growl. Our hero landed on the ground, and his brother, leaning on his back with his hands, made a very cunning and elaborate strike that the zombies 100% did not expect and were defeated by. From the cave, more and more zombies were flying towards our heroes. They seemed endless and would never stop. Our heroes were ready to fight and would not retreat until they destroyed every single zombie. Our hero, with a knife in hand, commanded everyone to gather together and shine flashlights in the zombies' faces. And if the zombies got closer, they were to hit them on the heads. But most importantly, they must not let the zombies bite them, because a person immediately turns into a zombie after that. On another clearing, an elderly man and a man in glasses stood next to 3 corpses and were talking. The man in glasses said that the two of them barely had enough strength to kill one, while the brothers were annihilating them in whole hordes. The man couldn't understand how they managed to do that. The elderly man said that these two had been studying martial arts since childhood, and even professional fighters couldn't defeat them, let alone a bunch of dead creatures. The man in glasses agreed with him and said that he never wanted to kill our hero, and now realized his mistake, wanting to apologize to him. Together with his brother, our hero destroyed a lot of zombies and stood on their corpses. The older brother spoke to his brother about how amazed he was at the amount of strength his brother had gained. Our hero said, "Maybe I can arrange a masterclass specifically for my older brother." Our hero turned around and looked at the girl who was very scared of everything that was happening. He reassured her and said that everything was fine. The girl believed him. She stood among the two brothers and nervously exhaled, grateful to them for what they had done for her. The older brother said that there was no need to thank him because it was his younger brother who constantly protected her. Our hero decided not to listen to this and waved his hand as he started to move away from his brother and the girl. Joe says he wants to see if the others are okay and leaves. Mr. Lin's subordinates were bitten by zombies and could turn into them at any moment. The men did not want to die and called the boss for help. Before they turned into zombies, they were killed by Joe, and Lin heard their screams while hiding behind a tree. He was scared and hoped that no one would find him, but the guy found him and was surprised by his luck. Joe tells the man to keep hiding and be quiet if he wants to survive. The guy left, leaving Mr. Lin by the tree. The man was afraid to make any sound and mentally planned to take revenge on the guy. Meanwhile, the survivors examined the surroundings, and Bing Bing says that she definitely heard someone's voice. The young man returns and everyone hears a cry for help from the cave. The girl understands that this voice belongs to the secretary. Joe says that he will check who it is himself, and the rest should return to the cars. Suddenly, the older brother says that he will go with him to cover his back. The guy agrees with his brother, but tells the others to return. Bing Bing doesn't want to let them go into this cave alone, but Joe replies that they will only interfere with them, and the two of them will try to find the secretary. Uncle Niu agrees with the guy, and he tells Huang and Bing Bing that the village needs them. They began to return, the girl could not object, and simply looked back. The guy wanted to prevent the zombie horde that would appear in a couple of days, because he didn't want any more victims. He hoped that the girl would protect the survivors in the village. The brother asks if it is still possible to save the secretary, to which the guy replies that if he has already been bitten, then there is no way to save him. The guy says that Bing Bing came to the village as a student to become a village official, and she needs the help of a secretary. Suddenly, Joe tells his brother to stop. In front of them lay the dried corpse of a man. Joe immediately realizes that something is wrong because, unlike other zombies, this one has become a mummy. Suddenly, Derek shines his flashlight into the distance and finds the secretary. The light from the flashlight fell on the back of a man who was calling for help. The man was overjoyed and started shouting that everything was okay and they would save him. Saying, "I'm so hungry," the man turns around and it was no longer a man, but a real monster. The guy pushes his brother away from the tentacles. He realizes that the zombie is too fast and they won't be able to escape. Then he takes out a knife and makes a split-second decision that he needs to attack. The zombie continues to call for help and shout that he is hungry. Joe dodged the tentacles and came within striking distance of the knife. He hit the zombie directly in the head, but did not have the expected effect. The knife was unable to cut through the head, and the guy is surprised at the hardness of the skin. He immediately realizes that this is a mutant zombie in front of him. This monster attacks the guy with its tentacles and he flies back. Joe rolled on the ground from such monstrous force. The zombie wanted to continue the attack, but suddenly a light illuminated him. It was Derek. He knew that bright light was effective against zombies. The guy tells his brother that they need to retreat if they want to live. Miraculously, they got out of the cave and caught their breath. Derek wonders what kind of mutant this was. Joe replies that the mutation is due to infection by animals, and in rare cases, the combination of two DNAs mutates. He adds that mutants are much stronger than ordinary zombies, and some even have unusual abilities. The guy assumes that the secretary was bitten by one of the bats that was in this cave. The young man says that such zombies are difficult to fight in the dark, but they are afraid of the light and are lucky that the moon is shining brightly today. Derek wonders how long it's been since his little brother became a zombie expert. Joe replies that the books describe exactly the same thing, and they need to take equipment to kill this creature tomorrow. Suddenly, they hear the sound of cutting air. It was bats flying out of the cave screaming. Perhaps they were flying away from someone and were a sign of the onset of something sinister. They rose like a black cloud in the sky and covered the moonlight. Suddenly, tentacles appeared from the cave, piercing the ground with a roar. It was a mutant zombie who jumped out of the cave at high speed. He attacked Derek with fury, trying to bite. Joe tried to stop the zombie by grabbing it by the tentacle. The guy understood that the zombie was very strong, and to win, he needed a powerful light source. Suddenly, a car appeared from the side from the darkness of the night. The car crashed into a zombie at high speed. Bing Bing was driving, and she suffered kickback as she crashed into a tree. Joe wasted no time in finishing off the zombie while it was immobilized. The girl got out of the car, asking if everything was okay with the guys. She was surprised that the zombie turned out to be the secretary. Derek breathed a sigh of relief after defeating the zombie, since it could have killed them both. Looking at their brother, the guy and girl couldn't believe their eyes. The man was careless and was injured by a mutant zombie. He apologizes for this and tells his brother to take care of the family for him. Joe wanted to protect his brother and did not want a repeat of the past. He felt tears on his face. He turned around, looking at the defeated zombie. A mutant zombie could control ordinary zombies, but that was not the most important thing. The most important thing was the zombie core in the back of their heads. Joe tells his brother that this thing can help while there are no symptoms yet. If he eats it now, then there is a chance of turning into a Superman, immune to the zombie virus. But the likelihood that they would not be was greater. Derek used the cannonball without fear, since he had no other choice. Joe says that 2 days will be enough to understand whether the core worked or not. Derek goes into the cave and told them to seal the entrance if he doesn't come out in 2 days. But if he does come out, they shouldn't be too jealous. Finally, a smile appears on the guy's face and he says that he will wait for his return. Unfortunately for them, Lin heard this conversation, hiding behind a tree. The next morning, their small village was calm. Joe Ying appeared in her brother's room and was dressed in a very unusual costume. Joe smiled and said that she looked like a weirdo. The sister says that everyone in the family should be protected, and she made this armor herself. The guy replies that this armor will not help her in any way when attacked by monsters. Walking out into the courtyard, Joe saw his father strengthening the wall. The father hugs a barrel of gunpowder and asks where his son got so much. The next moment, he runs away with her in an unknown direction, and a moment later, Joe hears the doorbell. Bing Bing was standing on the threshold and the guy asks what she wants. The girl collected her thoughts and asks the guy to help her. She says she can't contact the local police department and the signal is gone. Joe confirmed her words, and this seemed strange to him, since this had not happened in the past. The girl asks the guy to accompany her to the station, since the lack of communication may be a problem in the future. The guy agreed and they set off, saying goodbye to his parents. Meanwhile, Derek was sitting alone in a cave and suddenly heard footsteps. Suddenly, some kind of liquid spread across the ground and the guy knew it. The liquid was gasoline and someone set it on fire. Sometime later, Joe and Bing Bing were driving a pickup truck along the highway, and although the girl had no hearing, she tried to sing the song, thereby calming her nerves. The guy smiled because this was truly the Bing Bing he knew in the past. The young man understood that he could not rely only on his past experience, and a lot would also depend on Bing Bing. Gathering his thoughts, he invites the girl to move home with them. The girl is embarrassed and asks why she should live with him. Joe understood that if he told the girl about her future superpowers, she would not believe it. So he says he needs her and he can't let her suffer. The girl blushes and looks at the guy with disbelief. But after a moment, paying attention to the road, they stop. The car could not drive further because the road was blocked. The guy doesn't remember this happening in the past. Due to the road closure, it will be difficult to bring supplies. He sighs and suggests returning to the village first. The girl agrees with him. The guy calculated that the supplies would last for some time, but the lack of signal and the blocked road gave him no rest. He had a bad feeling which did not disappoint him. Due to punctured tires, the car skidded and became difficult to drive. Having difficulty stopping the car, they got out to look at the problem. Bing Bing is surprised by the sudden appearance of car spikes. Joe tells her to be careful and hide, since these thorns were placed by a man. Lin suddenly appears and says that he is glad to see the guy in good health. The young man asks what he wants. Lin replied that he must avenge his subordinates. Joe says that he is not to blame for their deaths, and since he wants revenge, he must cut up the zombies. But he is too cowardly to go against the zombies. The man pointed a gun at the guy and said he would kill him. The young man was confident in his strength and that the bullet would not harm him. The villain grinned and the sound of the trigger being pulled was heard in the silence. The bullet instantly fired and whistled past the guy, and at the same moment Joe heard a scream behind him. In fact, Lin was not aiming at him, but at Bing Bing. He did not expect such meanness and became angry with the man. Lin laughed and said that to deal with the guy he would start with the people around him. He also adds that he heard about his brother's infection and decided to help him. Since he knew that Joe could not cope on his own and therefore blew up that cave, the guy, hearing this, ran furiously towards the enemy. Bing Bing shouted at him to stop and think about it. Lin was glad that his provocation worked, as he had been waiting for this moment. Suddenly, a huge wolf appeared from the forest, looking at the man with hunger in his eyes. Like a flash of lightning, he attacked him and bit off his hand. The guy was surprised by the sudden appearance of a rank 2 zombie wolf. Meanwhile, Zhou Ying was bored and waited for her brother and Bing Bing to return. The next moment, she sees Uncle Huang and Uncle Nu outside. The girl tells them that her brother left and asks them what happened. They tell her that she should look at the mountain in the distance. At first, the girl didn't understand what was going on. She took the phone to look at it in more detail. She was amazed by what she saw. A horde of zombies was approaching from the mountain. Lin wallowed in his own blood and was glad that he would not die alone today. After the first catch, the monster attacked the guy. Zhou wasted no time and calmly stabbed him with the knife. Luckily, it was light and the zombie wolf was not that strong. Therefore, the wolf must die. Otherwise, when night comes, they will all die. At that moment, a strange noise began to be heard from the forest. Looking to where it was coming from, he saw a horde of zombies quickly approaching. Zhou thought that since they had killed the secretary's summoner, the horde should not have appeared. But suddenly he realized that the source of the virus was not the secretary, but bats. By this point, the zombie wolf had recovered and was ready for the second round. The wolf hit the ground with his paw, and the guy was thrown into the air from such a powerful blow. Paying attention to the wound he had previously inflicted, the guy realized that the wolf could regenerate. Zhou had big problems. He needed to somehow defeat this monster. Meanwhile, in the very cave in which the explosion occurred, the stones that blocked the passage flew out at high speed from some unknown force. After a short moment, the girl could not believe her eyes. She was very scared. The zombie wolf was victorious and was ready to eat the young man alive. But suddenly, the guy felt a sharp surge of strength in his body. He was pleasantly surprised to feel that power again. Having gained strength, the guy became very strong. He hit the wolf with his fist. He flew away from the large impulse. The guy in the blink of an eye found himself next to the wolf and was ready to strike. The next moment, he blasted the wolf with his incredible strength. The girl, looking at this, unconsciously called the guy by name. Bingbing was surprised at how strong the young man was. She had a feeling that Zhou could get out of any situation. Zhou suddenly awakened his super strength, but he didn't remember anyone doing the same without activating the zombie core in the past. But he suddenly came to his senses and told the girl to get up, since they did not have time to rest. Zombies were approaching from all sides, and it was not safe here. The guy said that he would carry the girl on his back because she was wounded, and she should hold on tight. The next moment, they were running away from the zombies and heading to the safe zone. By evening, they could already see the village in the distance. Looking back, they realized that they had brought a tail with them, and it would be difficult to kill all the zombies. Suddenly, there was an explosion, and many zombies were killed, and loud music could be heard afterwards. Their father and younger sister came to their aid. After some time, the car was speeding along the highway, and Zhou Ying threw explosive bottles out of the window. The next second, everything lit up with a bright flame. Zhou Ying was delighted with the emotions she received. Zhou found a first aid kit and wanted to take gauze, bandages, and iodine to take care of Bingbing. But suddenly, the sister gets ahead of her brother and says that you shouldn't touch the girl's feet so brazenly. Only if they have a closer relationship, so she will take care of Bingbing herself. The young man asks his father where he got the explosives from. The man replies that he made it himself, since in his youth he was obsessed with its creation and even worked as a specialist in mine explosions. But unfortunately, after the ore was depleted and he was fired, he never touched dynamite. They finally made it home after a grueling battle with zombies. Suddenly, they hear a loud scream from the house and realize that something is wrong. They couldn't open the door because it was locked, so Zhou simply kicked it down with force. In front of them, they saw a woman and a zombie. The situation did not seem dangerous. On the contrary, everyone was speechless at the suddenly presented picture. A woman was beating up a zombie who used to be from a neighboring village. Zhou asks his father when his mother learned to fight so well, to which the man replies that in her youth, even 5 people could not cope with her. But after they met, she became softer. After some time, the woman noticed the guests and greeted them, but they had no time to talk as more and more zombies appeared. Uncle Huang and Uncle Nu warned everyone that a huge crowd of zombies was approaching from the west. Hearing this, the guy got angry and he was ready to fight. In his previous life, his entire family suffered due to a sudden zombie attack. But now everyone is ready and will not leave these creatures even a chance to win. The guy was sure that they would definitely survive because he did not fight alone and all his relatives were nearby. The zombies were infecting more people and were going to lay siege to their home. Zhou was sure that someone was controlling these creatures. Looking up, he saw the figure of a man standing alone in the distance. This figure was none other than Lin. He was somehow able to survive. The battle dragged on, but the zombies did not decrease. They continued to attack their house. They had already used up all the explosives, and the situation was getting more complicated. Zombies were everywhere, and the guy felt that they had tactics. Since the zombies had been advancing for a long time, everyone was tired from such a long battle. At a rapid pace, zombies filled everything around. Zhou tells everyone to go to the courtyard and hold the defense there, and he will take over the rest. The next moment, a crowd of zombies attacked him, and a mountain formed. The guy activated the Bloody Buddha ability and destroyed all the zombies. He felt his blood boiling in his body, and a force awakening that could destroy everything in its path. He had seen in his previous life how one commander of the Dawn Army had the same ability. Somehow, his Blood Buddha ability was much weaker, but that didn't matter at the moment, since he had to deal not with a crowd of zombies, but with the one who controls them. Meanwhile, everyone fought with the zombies and did not let them go further. Auntie covered Bingbing's back and asked if she was okay since she was injured before. The girl thanks for the help and asks where Joe ran away to. Zhou Ying replies that her brother is now definitely crushing all the zombies left and right. She adds that there is no need to worry as her brother is safe and unharmed. Turning back, she saw a destroyed wall and a lying man. The lying person was Zhou. He shouted to everyone not to come near and to run away from here as quickly as possible. The one who sent him flying and forced him to break through the wall was a huge zombie bear. The guy did not want to give up. He knew that he had to fight to the end. Zhou could not allow that situation to happen again. He had to protect those he cared about. The young man stood up. He wanted more power. A strong wind blew. Everyone was worried about the guy. Zhou went on the offensive with renewed vigor. He wanted to win as quickly as possible. But suddenly Derek appears. He stops the bear's huge paw with one hand. The guy adds that it took him time far away in the mountains to get used to this power. Derek decided to show his younger brother how to use such power. The bear flew several meters, kicking up dust and stones along the way. But the monster is not dead, so Derek tells Cho to mind his own business, and then he can handle it himself. The young man was glad to see his older brother and says that he leaves everything to him. After some time, the young man looked at his opponent with coldness in his eyes. In front of him stood the renewed Lin, who threw away the pitiful human body. The man felt like a king. He not only retained his sanity, but also could control a crowd of zombies. Lin thanks the guy for cutting the zombie wolf into small pieces. Only with his help was he able to easily get the core and eat it. The next moment, Joe cuts Lin in half. The guy says that he is too talkative for a coward, and he is tired of listening to his monologues. The young man is indignant at Lin's pride in calling himself king. Joe thought that the pressure of the zombies on the family should lessen, since there was no one left to control them. But suddenly he heard laughter behind him. The man was not dead yet. Lin says that a measly knife cannot kill him. The guy immediately realized that the man had been given the ability to regenerate that wolf. Lin became very fast. Joe didn't even see his movements as he appeared behind him. The mutant says that resistance is useless, and he will kill them all, and then they will join his army. It is precisely because people are just cattle that he brought zombies here to clean out this place. Meanwhile, the hole in the wall was sealed with a sheet of steel, and the zombies kept pushing with more force. Uncle New was already at the limit of his strength and said that if this continues, he will not be able to stand it. Jack said to wait a little longer until his sons figured everything out. Suddenly, a huge zombie bear falls onto the temporary wall. The next moment, Derek appears and says that although the battle was difficult, now these beasts can close any gap. But Derek could not go to the aid of his brother, since there were still a lot of zombies. He believed that Joe could handle everything. Meanwhile, Joe's battle with the mutant was not in his favor. The difference in strength was colossal. Lin won easily and was upset by the guy's weakness. Suddenly, the guy stood up and swung a knife at the zombie. Joe was furious that Lin didn't care about him. He was ready to kill him because he wanted to raise his hand against his family. Although the zombie was injured, he recovered before our eyes with unimaginable speed. A second later, he lunged and attacked the guy with his claws. The mutant zombie had not only great speed and regeneration, but also by force, which did not require proof. The guy was injured, which meant that the effect of the Bloody Buddha's ability did not work. Lin had at least a little fun, because he thought that his claws would immediately reach the internal organs. Joe realized that his stamina was declining too quickly, and he would not be able to maintain his ability for long. This meant that the next attack would determine the outcome of the battle. Lin himself did not know the limit of his power, and a moment later he inflicted another wound on the guy. A grenade appeared from the guy's sleeve and he threw it right at the zombie's face. Upon contact, an explosion occurred and smoke rose. Lin laughed and said that an ordinary grenade would not kill him. But looking around, he realized that Joe had fled with his tail between his legs. The man laughed because running away was useless, because he could find him by the smell of blood. He added that Joe could run as long as he wanted, but in the end, he would kill him. Meanwhile, the young man hid in the store, catching his breath and healing his wounds. Somehow, with the help of bandages, he managed to stop the bleeding, and the fact that his ability helped heal wounds was a pleasant surprise. But despite this, his forces were running out, and they were only enough for one attack. Outside, Lin came to the smell of Joe's blood. He was surprised that the guy chose a gas station store as the gravesite. The man immediately saw a trap consisting of gasoline, a wire rope, and a grenade. He laughed at the guy's stupidity, as he had no intention of falling into the trap. He felt that he did not need to enter the room, since the most pungent smell of blood came from above. The man was surprised because only the guy's jacket fell from the roof. The moment the jacket fell, Joe appeared right in front of Lin. He threw a handful of salt right in the mutant's face. The zombie immediately screamed in pain. He did not expect the sudden attack. The guy says it's just salt, can't he smell it? He also adds that he will not see or feel anything. since he adopted the abilities of the zombie wolf, he also received his weaknesses. There are a lot of olfactory cells in the noses of wolves, and when the nasal cavity is irritated, he probably now feels incredible pain. He adds that everyone will lower their guard, believing that they have seen through the enemy's trap, and Lin is not a king, but just a pathetic zombie. The next moment, the mutant tries to kill the guy, but nothing works out for him, since he missed his chance. Joe gathers all his power and concentrates it in his hands, just as his brother had shown him before. The zombie saw in front of him the huge aura and power of the guy, which he had collected in a short time. Joe says goodbye to the monster and strikes him. A huge impulse of force attacked the man at once and broke the ground. But even such a blow could not cut the mutant's body. The next moment, the pit in which Lin lay began to fill with gasoline. The monster did not understand what was happening. Joe says that he decided to try to use the entire supply of the gas station, since ordinary grenades do not work on him. The guy says that this station will be the site of Lin's grave. Having said goodbye, he throws a grenade straight into the pit. People heard a loud explosion that rang throughout the village. Derek asked his father if everything was okay. He replies that everything is fine, looking at the huge cloud of smoke rising to the sky. When the smoke cleared, the sun illuminated the area with bright rays. The zombie crowd retreated because they were afraid of sunlight. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief as they managed to survive this stormy night. They were very happy about their first triumphant victory. Joe, returning home, was also very happy, since all his relatives were safe and sound. Suddenly, behind him, he hears a girl calling him. She asks for help, and the next second she falls from loss of consciousness. This girl was familiar to the guy. Her name was Layla. Sometime later at home, Joe Ying tells his brother that he is a pervert because he began to undress the girl right in the middle of the street. The guy says he just wanted to make sure the girl wasn't bitten, since their own safety comes first. He also adds that he himself was without a t-shirt, to which his sister replies that this is certainly the answer of a pervert. He was lucky that Bing Bing didn't see it, and she was there to stop him. The guy doesn't understand what his sister is talking about. At this moment, Bing Bing comes out of the room and says that Layla's condition is normal. She will recover after sleep. There was silence in the corridor, and the girl who had just appeared did not understand what was going on. Immediately, Joe Ying comes to his senses and says that everything is fine. Joe picks up and thanks the girl for her help. Bing Bing is embarrassed and says that she didn't do anything special. A company of 3 people gathered to check if there were survivors and said goodbye. Suddenly, the young man shouts at Bing Bing not to blame herself for the deaths of others, because even with all the precautions, the wave of zombies could not be stopped. He adds that the most important thing is to move forward. Finally, the sadness disappeared from the girl's face. She smiled and said that he was right. Derek, who was sitting in the car, said that Joe had finally become an adult. The young man tells his brother that this time everything will definitely be different. The guys got into the car because they had to get rid of all the corpses. Outside the city, they piled up and burned a bunch of corpses. They had to be burned, since animals that eat them could also mutate. Derek says he wants to sleep, and Cho will have to drive the car back himself, as well as fill up the tank and wash the car. The young man awkwardly says that there is no more gas station. He also adds that he doesn't want to wash the car just because his older brother said so. Then Derek suggests playing a game of demon hunting. Instead of rock, paper, scissors, the 2 brothers came up with this game themselves. They loved it since childhood. The rules were very simple. The hunter stood still for 10 seconds. The demon's task was to run as fast as he could. If the hunter catches the demon in 3 minutes, he wins. 10 seconds later, Derek appears behind Cho and says that he can do it too. But the younger brother suddenly changes direction and dodges the grab. 2 brothers chased each other at high speed throughout the forest. Suddenly, Joe decides to climb a tree. He made a jump while running, but suddenly the tree under his foot disappears. In fact, it simply fell over and he was unable to jump on it. Derek used his ability and forcefully knocked the tree to the ground. The guy landed next to a fallen tree and turned back. He saw a tree log flying towards him, so he blocked it with his hand. Derek stood on the other side and applied pressure, thereby driving Cho into a trap. The guy could hardly hold on, since the difference in their strength was high, and it was not easy to surpass it. After a short time, there was nowhere to retreat, and the guy found himself in a dead end. The next moment, the log exploded under simultaneous pressure from both sides. Derek comes to his senses and says that he went a little too far. He asks if everything is okay with Cho, but looking ahead, he saw no one. The young man sat upstairs and said that victory was his, as 3 minutes had passed. Derek asks how the guy managed to get there. Joe replies that he simply pushed off the rock. He did not expect such a difference in strength. Derek asks how he got his powers. Since he ate the core himself, he thought that his brother did the same. The guy doesn't answer directly and says that his ability is like an effect of borrowing power, although in a past life he actually ate the core. Derek says that Cho can borrow his ability, but their powers are different. The young man says that he is almost right and suggests calling his ability the Bloody Buddha. And this ability increases speed, strength, and protection from physical damage. But so far, Zhou only understands 70% of the ability. Derek says he put the zombie bear core in the desk drawer in Cho's room, as it was better to be prepared for anything. The brothers did not know that someone behind the tree was eavesdropping on their conversation. As night falls in Zhou's room, Zhou Ying entered the room while her brother was sleeping. She was looking for the zombie core. By finding the core and absorbing it, she will finally gain superpower too. The next morning, the weather was sunny, and the birds were bathing in the sun's rays. Zhou plowed the land in order to grow crops for the future. The guy didn't want to work, but again, as the youngest son, his mother forced him. The young man thought that his mother was biased, since his brother was definitely free, but only he worked. In other respects, Zhou was also not ordinary, so he used his ability and began to cultivate the soil. Layla stood outside, gathering her thoughts to approach the guy. The girl was wearing only one white shirt, and one might say she looked seductive. In the end, the girl decided to come around the corner and called out to the guy. Looking ahead, she was surprised by the scene that appeared before her. Zhou turned around and asked the girl if everything was okay. Layla says she just wanted to thank the guy for saving her. The young man said that he was simply fulfilling a promise he had made long ago, and she did not owe him anything. The beauty says that it doesn't matter. She pours tea and asks the guy to help her again in the future. After listening to her, Zhou refused her offer. He was not interested in it. The girl did not expect such a sharp answer. She asked the reason for his refusal. The guy says that he promised to help because Uncle Lee took care of his family, and he simply returned the debt. But now that the debt is paid, he has no reason to help the girl every time. Layla was very upset. She looked down and said with difficulty that she understood. After some time, Zhou finally cleared away all the dirt he created when plowing the land. The young man realized that the Blood Buddha was not yet suitable for agricultural work, and he needed to improve his control over the ability. Suddenly, he hears a knock on the gate and opens it. It turns out that guests have come to him. After they described the situation in the village, the guy listened to them and hung his head and said that nothing could be done. Unfortunately, no one else survived in the village, and everyone was saddened by this news. The guests blamed themselves for the deaths of others because they felt responsible. But Zhou says that they are not to blame and did everything in their power. Uncle Nu asks what they should do next, since they didn't know how to improve the situation. The guy says that everything is simple. They need to take a shower first and then have dinner together. Because no matter what happens, the most important thing is that they are still alive and well. After a while, Bing Bing came out of the bathroom with wet hair. The clothes that Zhou Ying gave her were not enough for her, and the girl thought that she looked strange in them. At this moment, the girl was called to dinner, as the food was already ready. The girl was a little embarrassed because she looked strange, but she thought that there was nothing wrong with it. By evening, when the sun was already setting below the horizon, throughout the entire village, only one house had a light on. Preparations for the evening meal were in full swing in the kitchen. Everyone was talking and joking. Aunt Olivia tells Bing Bing to sit next to Zhou, to which the girl happily agrees. Layla watched with envy as the girl sat down, but could not say anything against it. Zhou offered the girl a soda with a smile, and she took it. Jack raised his glass and said that now at this table are all the survivors in the village. Communication has not yet been restored, and they do not know how things are in other places. But they all must survive at any cost. They have already survived a wave of zombies. This meant that they became one big family and they had to help each other in difficult times. And also, they must not only survive but also live in prosperity and well-being. Everyone raised their soda after such a speech and decided to drink to a bright future. Suddenly, the drink falls out of Zhou Ying's hands and she falls out of her chair. Derek immediately stands up and asks how she is feeling. The girl sweated profusely, her eyes turned red, and a barely audible roar escaped her mouth. With one glance, Zhou realized that something was wrong with his little sister. The next moment, the sister suddenly stood up and attacked the guy with a scream. She grabbed his hand with her teeth, but the guy was ready for this and activated his ability in advance. Everyone was surprised by the girl's behavior and were at a loss as to what was happening. The father tells his daughter to unhook from her brother, and he will settle everything if there is any disagreement. Behind the man, Layla was very frightened by this behavior, as if she had not seen this scene for the first time. Finally, Zhou Ying's impulse began to weaken, and the girl began to come to her senses. The guy asks how she is. The girl came to her senses and stepped back. She looked at the perplexed eyes of the others. Everyone was perplexed, and the father asked his daughter what it was. She was confused and did not know what to answer. Zhou Ying was embarrassed by the large number of eyes fixed on her and asked her brother to help her. The guy suddenly stabs his sister in the stomach. She did not expect such a turn of events. Taking his sister with him, Zhou said that she had drunk too much soda and needed to clear her head. Everyone looked with slight fear and surprise, They were simply speechless. On the street, Zhou Ying burst into tears because she realized that she had just almost attacked her family. The guy scolds his sister for her rashness and says that she is very lucky that after eating the kernel, she remained alive at all. The girl apologizes and says with sadness in her voice that she also wanted to have superpower. This time, even with the experience from his past life, Zhou was truly taken by surprise by his sister. He didn't even know what would have happened if he hadn't sensed something was wrong from the very beginning. The guy sighed and put his hand on his sister's head and said that he would teach her to use the new power. To begin with, she must close her eyes and think of the force as a flow of air that filled her body. The ability was already part of her instincts. And now, having this ability, she must open the world anew. The girl opened her eyes and the guy asks what she sees in front of her. Zhou Ying said that she sees the flow of life, and it seems that she could control this flow. She extended her hand to the plant in front of her, and it began to grow right before her eyes at great speed. The girl was very surprised that she accelerated the growth of the plant. Zhou replies that apparently it is, and the sister asks if he can do the same. The man was very happy because he had only planted these potatoes during the day. But now with the girl's ability, they don't have to worry about supplies. The girl was shocked by what she heard. She did not want her ability to be used for farming. She thought she could shoot laser beams, control thunder, or turn into a supergirl. But in the end, she is just a good farmer. Her brother was amazed at her imagination. Zhao knew that by eating the core, the probability of awakening the ability was very small. And the fact that his brother and sister received it was clearly not just luck. He thought it all had something to do with his ability. Morning came, and as expected, the rooster tried to wake everyone up. But suddenly there was silence as Zhou grabbed the bird by the neck and told him not to make any noise. The guy asks where Uncle Nu got the rooster from. The man replies that they also have a chicken. He personally raised them so that later she would lay eggs. A couple of years ago, the farm was short on workers, and he received a chicken and a rooster as a reward for his help. Hearing that there was a farm in the village, the guy immediately remembered that it was not so far away. Thus, they went to the main farm of the village, and after some time arrived at their destination. Zhou said they need to take as many birds as possible to breed them at home, and also take eggs with unborn chicks with you. Juan says that everyone on the farm is dead, and asks if they will suddenly turn into zombies. Even though they looked like they had been stabbed to death, there was always the possibility of danger. The guy reassures them, saying that zombies do not appear in the middle of the day, but the main thing is not to go into the basement, where the sun's rays do not reach. Juan says they still don't know what's going on outside. He couldn't believe that all the people there were dead too. Uncle Nu replies that people have many effective weapons, and maybe help will soon reach them. Zhou says that it is better for them not to have high hopes, because the worst thing is not the zombies themselves, but the virus, the consequences of which go far beyond the scope of human imagination, and they could only rely on themselves. After some time, Juan found an incubator and told her companions to look at their number. Uncle Nu was very happy about this discovery, since it meant the success of their foray. The guy asks the man if these eggs are suitable, to which he replies that it is possible, under the right conditions, to carry out artificial incubation. Juan says that there are a lot of eggs, but there are not a single chicken, and this is very strange. Zhou agrees and says that if they all died, then at least the bodies would remain. Suddenly, they hear a sound from the entrance and turn around to see what it was. It turns out that it was a goose. It made sounds characteristic of its species. Everyone was surprised by the sudden appearance of the goose. Juan was very glad that there were surviving animals on the farm. He asked Zhou for a bag and said that he already had experience in catching birds for slaughter. The young man suspected something but decided to remain silent for now. Afterwards, the man began to carefully catch the goose and tie it up. He quickly managed to cope with the task and easily immobilize the goose. But suddenly the bird opened its beak and turned into a monster. Zhou reacted in time and saved Huang from the zombie goose. The man started sweating and asked what it was, but they didn't have time to talk since they had to leave. Once outside, they stopped abruptly and were surprised by what they saw. A whole flock of hungry zombie monsters rushed towards them, who surprisingly were not afraid of the sun. It was very difficult to resist the birds, since there were so many of them. Zhou, noticing the escape route, called the men behind him. They began to run away as fast as they could because they did not want to be eaten. The guy understood that Huang and Uncle Nu were too slow, and at this pace they would definitely not be able to break away from the mutated geese. The men were already out of breath from running and covered in sweat. The young man urgently needed to come up with something. There was nothing to do, so the guy decided to try a new ability that his sister had previously shown him. This power was different from the one his brother possessed, and was perhaps more practical. The young man used his growth ability and vines began to emerge from all sides. They stretched out along the entire length and attacked the monsters who were constantly chasing people. The guy was glad that he managed to slow down his pursuers and said that they needed to break away. But unfortunately, the path ahead was blocked by more zombie geese. They were surrounded. They looked at the monsters' mouths and thought that they were finished. But Joe shouted at them to quickly run inside. They ran into the room and closed the door behind them, the men catching their breath. The man looked out the window and said that now they were stuck here for a long time. Even if Joe is strong enough to get out, he and Huang certainly won't be strong enough. The young man replies that it was due to his negligence that they were in danger, and he will do everything to ensure that they return unharmed. Joe thought through all the options, but was still hesitant to use the Blood Buddha's ability due to limitations. But suddenly Juan finds a computer and says that the electricity on the farm is still not turned off. The guy doesn't understand how this information will help them in this situation. The man says that since the computer turns on and you can connect to the network, then you can find a way. Suddenly, monsters start breaking into the door. The guy blocked the door and told Juan to hurry up because the door wouldn't hold up for long. The man began to quickly type on the keyboard and asked for 3 more minutes. He was very confident that he would find something that would help them. Joe understood that in 3 minutes the door would definitely break down, and it was better for him to attack first. So he activated the ability and kicked the door out. He grabbed the handle of the broken door and looked at the monsters with rage. The zombie geese knew no mercy and fear. When they saw a man, they immediately attacked him. The guy began to clear a path forward, using the door as a shield in front of him. The next moment, he used the ability and struck with all his might, destroying all the monsters in front of him. The guy sighed, since with this he secured at least a couple of minutes. But turning his attention to the remaining mass, he realized that it was moving and trying to come together. Uncle Niu asks Huang how long he will continue to fuss, since, judging by the sounds, it was not easy for Joe. He replied that there was still a little time left. He mentally asked Joe to hold out a little longer. Once the file is downloaded on your computer, everything will be over. Meanwhile, the guy was surprised by the sight of the creature that formed right in front of him. The next second, this monster rushed forward and attacked the guy. It had enormous power, and Joe's ability was not enough. The young man flew back, and from the strong push, his throat began to bleed. At that moment, Uncle Nu came out and told the guy to run away with Juan, and he would try to detain this monster. The guy got up and went to the man, who shouted at him not to hesitate, otherwise they would all die here. But the young man was adamant. He wanted to fulfill his promise that he would get them out of here at any cost. The mutant zombie began to attack the victims. Joe felt as if the energy of the growth acceleration and strength enhancement abilities were combined together. It was a strange feeling. It was as if his whole being wanted to win. The next moment, the guy hit with his fist, and the creature scattered to the sides. But immediately after that, his power dissipated. The guy was very surprised and glad that his idea worked after all. But he could not understand what this new power was. The blow was very powerful, so much so that now he could not move his hand. There was no time to recover, as more zombie geese appeared around the corner. Joe was annoyed that there was no end to them, but he was also in a dangerous situation. The danger was approaching every second, and the guy could not move, as he had used up all his strength. Suddenly, music began to play throughout the village, and the zombie goose heard it and stopped a few centimeters from Joe. The melody was familiar to the monsters, and they ran back in a hurry. Juan leaves the room and asks if everything is okay with them. Uncle Nu in response asks if he turned on these sounds. The man replies that he really did. These sounds indicated the beginning of feeding on the farm. Since all the animals remembered this melody, they immediately ran to the feeding place. Fortunately, he made it in time, but they will never come to the farm again. They were very lucky that the chicken eggs did not break. Juan asks when the man managed to take them, to which he replies that while he was busy catching the goose, he managed to grab a few. Juan asks if these eggs are mutated. Uncle Nu replied that this cannot be, since these eggs are no more than a week old, and those monsters would not have time to lay them. Joe sat in the back of his pickup truck and thought about the new power he had recently unleashed. When they arrived home, they held a general meeting. Zhou Ying asks everyone to pay attention, as she wanted to outline the further plan of action. For starters, the security group, which is responsible for patrolling and building protective structures. It included Commander-in-Chief Jack, Juan, and Derek. Then, the agriculture group is responsible for growing crops and raising livestock. It included Uncle Nu and the girl herself, since she had a very useful ability and, as a farmer, would do everything at the highest level. Next came the resource distribution group, which kept records of the expenditure of supplies and resources and also planned their use. Olivia and Layla were in charge. And last but not least is the intelligence group, the eyes and ears that search for resources and analyze the environment. In this group were Joe and Bing Bing. Thus, the meeting was over, and everyone had their role and task. After some time, the young man collected everything he needed in his bag for his foray outside. The guy took everything that could be useful, grenades, Molotov cocktails, first aid kit, weapons, since it was impossible to repeat the mistakes of the past. Suddenly, he hears someone calling him in a quiet voice. It was Layla. She quietly approached him and pressed herself against his back. The girl asked the guy to take her with him. The guy does not understand the reason for such a request. She tries to find the reason and says that she is afraid of Zhou Ying, as she can turn into a zombie. The girl adds that she just wants to go with the guy. She knew every corner of the village and could be useful. Layla says that there are plenty of supplies there, and they can run away together. They will definitely be able to hold out until help arrives. The girl would rely on the guy for everything, and no one knew the place except her. Looking forward, the girl saw the guy's blood-curdling gaze in front of her. The guy was very attached to his family and did not tolerate any disrespect towards her, and the girl suggested that he leave his family. He says that if she says that again, she will fly out of their house. In addition, he reminds him that it was she who left him that time. Coming out of his room, the guy sees Bingbing standing at the entrance. The girl was a little embarrassed and asked the guy if they could move out. Joe agreed and they left. After some time, they arrived at a small lake. There was a fishery here at a very great distance from the nearest settlement. Bingbing says that because of this, there were probably few fishermen here and asks who opened this farm. Joe replies that this place belongs to that same guy, Lin, and he adds that he found this place by accident. The girl is interested in the reason for Lin's contempt for Joe. The guy replies that it all started in high school when he didn't want to obey someone just because of his family's money. And then Joe began to communicate closely with Layla, and Lin tried to show off in front of her every time in order to woo her. Bingbing says that Lin didn't like Layla because he often insulted her in public. The guy said that Lin's goal was only to take revenge on him, and Layla is free to be with whomever she wants, despite the then rumors of their marriage. Joe says that it was the adults who planned to marry them, since they communicated so closely without even asking them. The girl finally understood everything, although she did not understand how such love could lead to marriage. Suddenly, the girl felt something, but there were no signs of danger on the water. They came to a garage and there was a large storage area in the basement. However, the passage defense was very high, like in a bank. The girl asks the guy what to do next. The guy replies that they should try their luck anyway. But in fact, in a past life, he was already here, hiding from zombies. He was able to hold out for a long time on supplies. But in the past, he came when the power was already out, and the guy managed to turn on the backup power source in time to prevent the food from spoiling. This time, there was no power outage. Perhaps something had changed due to the fact that they stopped the first wave of zombies, and there was a possibility that there were survivors here. Suddenly, he hears a girl scream and asks her what happened. She replies that everything is fine, and she was just not careful. Bingbing says that fish heads are too strange and asks the guy what kind of fish they are. Suddenly, the fish's pupil twitched and turned crimson red. Zhou rushed forward sharply, as he immediately realized that these fish had mutated into zombies. As soon as the guy touched the fish, it hit him with a stream of water. The young man did not expect such a sharp and strong attack, and the next second he flew into the wall. Judging by the strength of the monster, the guy immediately realized that it was a second-rank zombie. Bingbing stood in front of the guy, ready to protect him, and asks what they should do next. The guy shouts that they need to leave because they can't cope with the monster, but suddenly he hears a sound from the entrance. He was very surprised when the vault door closed and they were trapped. The guy took a knife out of his bag and rushed to attack, since they didn't have time to mess with the door. He had to deal with the danger first. Bingbing could not help and watch the battles, hoping that the guy would cope. The knife cut into the scales of the fish, as if into iron armor without cutting a drop. There was no way the guy could cut through these scales with force. The creature was completely covered in scales, but it must have a weak spot. After analyzing with his own eye, the guy realized that the weak point of zombies is the gills. Zhou made a dash and found himself behind the zombie, and then pointed his knife at the weak point of the fish. But suddenly, when the knife was already very close, mutated worms appeared. They usually lived in the gills of fish and coexisted together, protecting the host in times of danger. The guy's attack failed, and the fish wasted no time in attacking him with its tail. The next moment, the guy flew to the side, receiving injuries. The fish immediately approached him and wanted to attack him with a stream of water. But the guy took an exposed cable with electricity and paralyzed the zombie with a discharge of static voltage. He was lucky that the creature had no resistance to pure energy. It was not an easy battle. The guy grinned at the fact that even though everything was different from his previous life, but basically these were not key events. It was obvious that someone had deliberately placed this mutant in the vault. Bingbing asks if the guy is safe, to which he replies that everything is fine and they need to return quickly, since it is not safe here. Trying to turn the door handle, it did not yield to the girl's efforts. She was amazed that the door did not move at all, as if someone had locked it from the outside. Joe activated his powers and asks Bing Bing to step aside. The next moment, he hits the door with his fist with all his might. After all the dust had settled, they saw that the door was safe and sound. The material of this door was as strong as a bank vault and also underground. It was not easy to open it with brute force. Joe says that this was the strongest blow he could unleash at the moment, and apparently there is no way to open the door. The guy is tired and adds that he needs to rest a little. The girl tells the guy to rest, and she will examine this place. Perhaps there was another way out. Joe was resting, sitting in the corner near a pile of stones, when he suddenly opened his eyes. Since Bing Bing arrived depressed, she found nothing even though she looked through every corner. Unfortunately, there was no other option in this vault. The temperature in the storage facility was about -18, and even if they withstood the cold, they would sooner or later run out of oxygen. There was no time to hesitate, and the guy stood up, saying that he would try again. Suddenly, Joe notices the cannonball that the girl was holding. She asks him if she will gain powers like him if she eats it. The guy, worried about the girl, suddenly grabs her hand and says that this is too dangerous. She will not be able to use her ability constantly, and moreover, the effect is limited. Bing Bing says that if this continues, they will die here, so she asks the guy to let her risk her life. Take a risk and hope that he can survive, and the awakened ability will allow them to get out of here. Receptivity is the ability to awaken Bing Bing in a past life. He didn't know if anything would change this time because of the guy's intervention. Joe asks if she is sure. He thought that since she showed courage, he should not be afraid either. Bing Bing says that in the past, she would have been scared, but now she is ready with him. It was already evening outside and the sun was setting. Jack and Derek searched for the missing, but no one responded to their call. Suddenly, they hear a loud roar. Jack asks if the zombies should be afraid of the sun. Derek says they only appear at night, but something was clearly wrong here. The next moment, they hear Juan scream and run towards him. They didn't know that someone was listening behind the tree. In his memories, Joe saw a destroyed city. The guy was on the roof of a destroyed building in a dream. A voice from the side wakes him up and asks him to wake up quickly. Opening his eyes and looking to the right, he sees a girl with a rifle in front of him. This girl was Bing Bing. She commanded him to get up, because she had a job for him. She noticed 4 huge zombie dogs of the 4th rank and 2 tigers of the 6th rank. The guy said that because of them, a lot of zombies would gather here in about 20 minutes, and they needed to notify the others. Bing Bing says that they won't make it in time, and only if she can deal with the leader, she can gain some time. The guy does not agree and says that as a captain, there is no point in staying here. The girl says that Joe's abilities have not yet awakened, and his presence will only interfere. The guy was saddened that after eating the zombie core, his ability had not yet awakened. The guy reluctantly tells the girl that she simply must survive. The girl smiled and nodded to the guy, and the sun's rays illuminated her beautiful face. Suddenly, the guy wakes up from his sleep as the girl woke him up. Waking up, the guy notices that something is wrong with the girl and asks why she is all on fire. Bing Bing herself doesn't understand what's happening, but it was hard for her to breathe. She sweated profusely, and her whole body felt like it was on fire. The girl could no longer endure this heat. Joe asks to wait a little while he brings some ice, and he asks the girl to stop undressing. She replies that she can't and asks him not to look. The guy says that he didn't look and immediately turned away. After a while, he asks how she feels. Bing Bing says she feels much better. The next moment, she added that she saw zombies. There were a lot of them. Joe tells her not to panic, as that is her ability. The guy was convinced that he had no influence on anything, since the girl had this power in a past life. The girl says she sees a whole bunch of zombies underneath them. Joe is surprised by what he heard, as he did not know that there was something below. After searching a bit and moving the shelves aside, they found a secret passage down. There really was a staircase leading down. Having gone down, the girl asks what the smell is in this passage. The young man says that it is the smell of sulfur, and that the Lin family used fishing as a cover to illegally store gunpowder. It was not surprising that all the doors and equipment were still working. Apparently, they had spent a lot of money. Suddenly, they hear the roar of zombies who were walking aimlessly around the room. Joe says that it is too dark here, and he is counting on the girl, who is surprised by such a statement. The guy took out a knife and encouraged Bing Bing, saying that they would succeed. The girl, after listening to him, activated her ability and became serious. She told him the zombies' location, and the guy at the same moment destroyed them, clearing the passage. Thus, they continued to go deeper and neutralize all the attacking zombies. Finally, after some time, they reached a locked room and entered it. There were a lot of boxes, and the girl asks what they should do next, since they have reached a dead end. After looking around, Joe said that if they swam through, they would end up right in the pond outside. So they blew dust through the pipe and into the waters of the pond. Bing Bing was very happy that they could finally get out. Suddenly, a huge zombie fish appears next to the girl and grabs her. Joe grabbed the girl's hand and tried to pull her out of the monster's mouth. But despite all his efforts, water was not his element in the end. The grip weakened, and the fish carried the girl away in its mouth. The guy watched Bing Bing lose again and couldn't let it happen again. This time he was not going to leave the girl alone. The young man activated his ability, and kelp vines began to appear from the bottom. They grabbed the fish from all sides, but the monster resisted. The girl was running out of oxygen, but she saw Joe trying to save her. The last thing she saw was the guy holding out his hand to her. After some time on the surface, the girl opens her eyes. She jumps up abruptly and screams the guy's name. The guy turned around and was glad that the girl woke up. By that time, he had just heated up the canned food, as they needed to refresh themselves and gain strength. The girl thanks the guy and asks what happened to that fish. Joe replies that she probably became food for the rest of the mutants. He adds that she was more difficult to deal with than the monster in the vault. However, most likely, those mutated fish have already spread to other places and will be encountered again in the future. Bing Bing says that during university, the guy was quiet, and she thought that he would be difficult to get along with. But since the zombie invasion, he has saved her from danger more than once. The girl was a little embarrassed and asked why he was so kind to her. Joe was honest with her and said that he saved her first because of her ability, because she would help him to protect his family. The girl was a little upset, but was grateful for the honesty. Bing Bing asks why he saved her this time. The young man was silent for a long time, not knowing what to say, and when he began to speak, the girl stopped him and, turning away, asked when they were returning. Joe says that they need to move out right now, and thanks to her ability, they will be able to avoid collisions with zombies. Finally, in the middle of the night, they returned home. My little sister ran out and hugged her brother. She was very worried about him. The guy sees that the girl is worried and asks what happened while he was away. Joe Ying fell silent, and then suggested that they go inside first. At home, Juan was sitting on a chair. He was infected with the virus and was trying to escape. Joe was stunned by this event and asked how it happened. Derek said that when they went looking for them, they came across zombies lurking along the way. He wanted to find a rank 2 core to save Huang, but he failed. Uncle Niu asks if there is anything else that can be done. But it was already too late, since the virus had reached the brain, and if you give it the core, it will simply turn into a monster like Lin. Juan had difficulty pronouncing the words, but if you listened, you could understand that he did not want to become a zombie. He shouted to the guy not to doubt and decide quickly. Joe understood that there was no choice, and he would have to be neutralized. Suddenly, he remembers something, and there was still hope. He turns around and asks Olivia, his mother, to come with him. He took out the core of the zombie fish and told it to quickly eat it. The woman asks where he got it, to which the guy replies that he got it on a sortie. He hurried her so that she would quickly eat the kernel. The mother says that she is not infected and does not understand why her son asks her for this. At this moment, he hears a roar, and Derek says that he will not be able to hold Juan for long. Joe understood that something urgently needed to be done before his mother's ability awakened. At this moment, the zombie breaks the ropes and frees itself from its shackles. He asks Joe to kill him quickly before it is too late. The guy mentally apologizes to Brother Juan and was ready to strike. The zombie was also mentally prepared and no longer resisted. At that moment, Olivia activated her ability. She immediately used her ability and healed the zombies. Juan became human again. He was very happy. Everyone was surprised that Olivia suddenly awakened her ability and began to look many years younger. The girl didn't understand why everyone was staring at her like that. After some time of explanation from Cho, everyone understood where Olivia got her ability. Joe Ying was delighted that thanks to her ability, her mother became a beauty. Derek asks if she can turn all the zombies into normal people now. But Joe said that this ability can only heal those who have not completely transformed, and ordinary zombies will simply die. Jack was very happy that they could not be afraid of infection, since his wife would now save everyone. Olivia asks her son how he knew that she would have such an ability. Joe couldn't explain it, but he said that he suddenly felt that she would be the one to have the right ability. In addition, this was the case with the abilities of the brother and sister, but then the feeling was not so strong. Although the young man did not sense Bing Bing's ability and could not borrow her power, perhaps he could only copy the abilities of his family, and when they awakened the abilities, the guy became stronger. Sometime later, Bing Bing and Joe were in the living room. The guy asks the girl to find out how many zombies are in the area. She agrees and activates her ability, scanning the area around her. She says that there are about 100 zombies in the forest and the same number at the foot of the mountain. The young man asks if there are any rank 2 zombies among them. The girl nods affirmatively and says that she sees at least 3. Suddenly, Bing Bing notices that all the zombies began to move and were moving at the same time. It was as if they were gathering in one place at someone's call. Suddenly, the girl screams, seeing Lin. All the zombies were heading towards him. The guy saw with his own eyes how he was torn into pieces and doubts that the girl saw him. If it really is Lin, then he is the one who locked them in the vault. And also attacking Juan and the others was part of his plan. Bingbing asks what to do next. Perhaps he should inform the others to be careful. The guy says that Lin is probably now gathering a bunch of zombies to attack them. But instead of waiting for him to attack, they would attack first and take him by surprise. Peter, waving a flashlight, looked around the forest, saying what he knew for sure about his old enemy. The old enemy had not been seen for too long, but he understood that he could not stop the search. And suddenly a villainous male voice was heard. It was he, Louise, the same one who was torn to pieces at the last meeting. With his devilish smile, he gloated at the hero and was surprised that Peter himself had come for his death. His words received a strong response. The killer of the dead arrogantly said that he himself almost died last time. You can immediately see how angry he was with him as he yelled at him to shut up. After his screams, not even a second had passed before he pounced on his old enemy, Peter, who blinded him with a flashlight and did not think to dodge. But he shouldn't underestimate Louise. During this time, he'll gain quite a bit of strength and can easily pierce Peter's throat. But our hero is not so simple as to fall for such an obvious attack. He literally saw his every move. The ringing whistle of the blade as it was released from its sheath ran through the air, and the vile zombie was cut to pieces. A new gigantic wound appeared on his body, a gigantic cut in the side through which air could easily pass. While Louise's blood flowed down the blade, the hero realized something, or rather, he had already guessed something before. His wound was bleeding heavily, but it began to heal before his eyes with incredible speed. The hero noticed this and added that there were no wounds on his body. What a coward he was. In response, the dead man told him that Peter was too arrogant after all. No matter how much he wounded him, he was all alone. So behind the monster, a strong explosion thundered, which puzzled him, frightening him. But the guy didn't think that Louise had his own army. Only today, the old enemy would celebrate his death day. Meanwhile, in the direction of that explosion, a large cloud of smoke flowed, and the fire illuminated that crater. The explosion was truly powerful, creating a giant fire that sent smoke into the sky. In the middle of the fire lay the corpse of a dead man who smoldered in the wind and finally left the world. The culprit of the explosion turned out to be Peter's best father, who gloated at those monsters who were not even waiting for him. Now the big guy brought incredible pleasure from incinerating zombies. Well, it's not just that he dies laughing, but this laughter made him lose all his mind, and he completely forgot that he was standing on a tree. As soon as he took the first step, he fell from the tree. You wouldn't wish his stupidity on his enemy. But Mother came just in time and caught the giant man. What a force. Chris was incredibly happy with his dearest wife. Well, he literally beamed in front of her eyes. But she was not at all happy with the pile of muscles that fell on her. At such a time, only an incredible family and zombies are not asleep, who will collide with each other in a night battle. Anna understands well that now there is no time to hug her husband. She needs to fight back this terrible crowd. Our Ice Queen was terrifying with her gaze. She literally covered the hearts of the audience in ice. Suddenly, a blue star lit up above their heads, which does not bode well for their enemies. After the grand attack, they burned under blue flames. Their pain cannot be described in words, as if they were being melted alive. Suddenly, the first blow was followed by a new wave of blue energy, which burned everything in its path. The magnificent mother was fully aware of the new power, which exceeded all her expectations. After such beautiful attacks and blows on zombies, hubby only began to love her more, but our queen was so icy. After clearing one of the dead zones, a signal came from Anna, who asked Bella where they should go next. She immediately replied that they should go to the northwest about 1 kilometer. There should be 24 zombies there. Then my mother asked how their situation was. She answered the question by saying that everything was fine. They were all in the basement, and there was a guard at the entrance. Then Bella asked how brother Carl was doing, whether he was coping and how he was doing. He replied with some arrogance that these weaklings would never be enough for him alone. The old man, laughing, added into the radio that these zombies never dreamed that their whole family would come to them. Brother said that the reason for everything is their headquarters, Bella, who perfectly informs them and makes their work coordinated. Everyone agreed with Carl in chorus, and someone even offered to make her the commander of the detachment. The heroine was flattered by all the words. Suddenly, something shocked her. With her abilities, she looked into the battle towards Peter and Louise. It was not at all easy for the Deadman to fight against the hero. He literally surpassed him in everything. The boy looked arrogantly down at the enemy. A fire of confidence burned in his eyes that Louise could not repeat. He was shocked by all this. Everything was written on his face. He could not even imagine such power from Peter. The corpse did not want to die and lose too, which is why it screamed at the top of its voice. There was not a scratch on him, and Louise was bleeding and all his attacks were repelled. Then Peter asked him if he still had a chance to win. At the tip of his finger, incredible energy flowed. As soon as he pulled the trigger, the end of the main antagonist would come. But the vile Louise didn't think so at all. His terrible smile that shone in the darkness of the forest said everything for itself. That grim smile was followed by a scream into the radio from Bella, who warned that 3 second-rank dead men were approaching him. Immediately after this, 3 giant rats stood in front of him, blocking the path to Louise. He was shocked by the sudden appearance of 2 rank 2 rat monsters, but he well understood that they had no fighting strength or experience at all. Then the hero asked the enemy if he thought that he would defeat him with a crowd of rats. Louise was up to something very bad. That villainous grin spoke of all his intentions. To all this, he received a strange answer from the monster. Louise said that these rats were not for Peter at all, but for himself. Afterwards, the rats lay down on the floor, and he asked the hero to look more carefully while he pulled them out of their bodies. And he pulled out those same crystals, 3 crystals, but it's not at all clear what they were for. It was worth asking the question of how he eats crystals in order to increase his rank at the expense of the power of those rats. At that very moment, he turned into a devil in the flesh. His gloomy smile became even more terrible. He finally achieved the 3rd degree of transformation. The night continued. The blue crescent moon covered everything around with its pale light, even the giant mountain peaks that pierced the heavens. This creature has become even more dangerous. A zombie mutant with the 3rd rank is not at all what it was before. Our hero thinks the same thing, realizing that he has a high-ranking zombie in front of him, which means he will have to hit hard. After these thoughts, he thought no more and instantly surrounded himself with blood-red energy. It only took a second to fly at full speed towards the devil. Eyes full of power and rage saw the goal of cutting down the monster of the races forever, so that it would never get back up. Only now all his pressure disappeared immediately as the monster caught his blade in mid-flight when Peter wanted to bite into his neck. The enemy did not wait for the hero until he understood what was happening before his eyes and threw him aside. This blow does not allow the boy to come to his senses, leaving him without hope of victory. Louise could already smell the smell of victory over the enemy. His gloating smile is annoying, and he thinks that Peter is only capable of this. Previously, the hero himself could not even imagine that he would meet his old enemy in such a battle, where he would again find himself in the position of a loser. But the zombie killer does not despair and immediately decided to attack the monster while he was not waiting. The monster was not hurt at all. It was even disappointed in the powers of that arrogant Peter, who pretended to be everything he could. This was a real triumph for this vile creature. He was fully aware that all of Peter's capabilities had been exhausted. After the devil grabbed his head, the hero felt incredible pressure and fear. Something had to be done. The monster decided to trample the impudent boy into the ground and shake the earth so that it buried him. But the hero is not a weakling and used his last strength to escape from the enemy. This greatly surprised him. Rat Tail. Louise didn't know where his sworn enemy might have gone, but looking for him now is like looking for a wolf in sheep's clothing in the middle of a herd. Yes, he didn't even think of despairing. With all his desire, he said that in any case, he would finish off Peter and then his family. Meanwhile, the boy climbed out of the tree through the roots of which he escaped from the monster. This power amazed him. He did not expect such power from a zombie mutant of the 3rd rank, since he could not meet anyone like him in his previous life. When he got out completely, he said that he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to cope with him, even with Mother Anna and Brother Carl, that he needed to come up with something. As soon as he thought about this, everything around him began to glow with bloody flames. He looked up with great surprise. This light did not give him any peace. The source of this terrifying light was clearly visible behind the treetops. Above his head was a full blood moon, which only recently had been a crescent. It was clear to Peter that an ordinary zombie of the 3rd rank would not be able to do such a thing. But who could it be? Then followed an explosion of blue energy, which amazes with its strength and energy. What is happening this night? The energy spread at high speed in different directions, as if there was no end to it. That blue power collided with someone. This battle makes explosions of a completely different force and scale. Something completely incomprehensible is happening in this forest, something that is not real. Moreover, in the middle of these domes of energy, 2 silhouettes of a woman and a man levitated. Were they really to blame for all this? Only no one gave Peter the opportunity to get stuck into the battle of 2 godlike monsters of power, and the devil appeared behind him. The zombie killer is trying to turn on him to do something, but now he just has to do something. And the villain was very upset because he understands that the hero completely underestimates him. After those words, the demon sent the boy into space with his rat tail so that the air began to tremble. He broke all the trees in his path. They collapsed like sticks that teenagers break over their knees. The impact was too shocking. At such a speed, Peter destroyed a large boulder that had stood there for thousands of years. As soon as he makes a few more such swings of his tail, there will be nothing left of the local landscapes. It was not easy for him. With incredible heaviness, he crawled out of the stone. He was literally imprisoned alive in the stone. Only Louise came up to the hero in a few moments, and poking his finger on his forehead, asked why he didn't use his abilities to escape. "Well, if he can't escape, then he'll die so easily," said the evil devil. Suddenly, his words were followed by an explosion from those godlike monsters who had been fighting until now. There are too many unknowns in this forest. In this case, something inexplicable happened. The guy had a feeling that time had frozen. Everything was frozen, no one could move, otherwise he would be dead. He realized that he could not move, but his abilities were completely under his control. As soon as he realized this, Peter began to gather energy at his forehead in order to reproduce a beam of incredible power. That beam from his forehead pierced through the malicious Louise. He did not even dare to expect that such a setup would occur in such a case. But those deities were clearly on his side. At the most inconvenient moment, they seemed to deliberately stop everything, and immediately everything dissipated. Time resumed its course as soon as the monster realized that something wrong had happened, and Peter had injured him. For him, it was a terrible pain. His eye disappeared, and it was an incredible burden for him to endure. Louise was definitely haunted by a curse that even now did not leave him alone. After this battle, the scoundrel fled into the depths of the forest. We won't see him for a long time. His strength was leaving him. His eyelids were getting heavy. His mind was becoming clouded. And at the moment, time stood still only for him. The last energy that kept him on his feet ceased to work, and he fell while Brother Carl tried to call him. The boy was very worried about Peter. He wanted to know if he could get up, if he was safe, and how he was feeling. He was not at all interested in his well-being. The hero wanted only one thing, to catch up with that monster Louise. And all because the whole world is changing. Those deities whose abilities are difficult to imagine, they are obliged to catch up with them. And again, he was plunged into the memories of one of his lives, when he was in the survivors' camp. The hero in those days turned out to be a prisoner of the people of this camp. It was not for nothing that he was tied up. Suddenly, one of the guys spoke to their boss. As it turned out, there were no more survivors in his village. Their boss looked very scary, but he could still smile and asked how many zombies there were in Peter's village. From the outside, the hero looked very shabby. Initially, he remained silent, as if he was thinking about the question. After some thought, the answer came. Complete horror was happening in their villages. There were too many dead people, 1,000 or more. The survivors of the camp were not at all surprised by his words. They considered this number to be a very trifle, and the village as just another garbage dump. Like everyone else, their boss wasn't laughing. He was wondering what ranks those zombies had. With his head down, Peter reluctantly said that there was one of the 4th rank there. His eyes shone with lights. He was very interested in his words, but still asked him to try on some chains. Turning back, he noticed something was wrong. People were tied with chains on wooden posts. It reminded him of something. Skinny people, they constantly work. They look like homeless people from landfills. Are they really slaves? The hero thought. He was fully aware of the fate that awaited him if he remained here and decided to flee from here immediately. Only the trouble is, a wall of fire appeared in front of our hero, burning sinners in hell. Is it really because of his attempt to escape that he is already in the next world? Yes, the terrifying godlike man got angry with the guy, all just because he wanted to escape. The zombie killer was horrified. He had never seen such power and abilities before. His eyes said everything for themselves. But only the boss's gaze was much more terrible. He called himself and others like them superhumans chosen by the gods. They are here for ordinary people to be their slaves. Finally, Peter got out of the terrible memories, during which time he arrived at a place where there was a strange glow that night. He was simply sure that it was all somehow connected with those with abilities. Brother Peter doesn't remember much about those who gained special skills, but those who reached the high stages were still those scum. The hero wanted with all his might to understand what was happening here and noticed a mysterious crater, in the middle of which there was something shining. From the middle flowed a large stream of energy that appeared out of nowhere. Looking down, he was very interested in the picture that was happening in the crater. Clearly, this forest was not an ordinary one. He thought that it was the fault of this crystal that caused the crater to appear. It was emitting too much energy. When the hero fully examined the crystal, he was plunged into horror. A drop of fear ran down his cheek, and everything around was covered in darkness. He is consumed by a strange desire to devour this thing. It attracted him too much. He did not understand anything. Suddenly, someone touched his hand and ordered him to get away from here. What kind of wanderer? Could it be the one who made those bursts of energy yesterday? It didn't take even a second for the hero to jump out of the pit. This place is shrouded in mystery that needs to be revealed. The boy was not afraid. He acted calmly and instantly used his abilities to escape the unexpected attack. All in darkness, Peter asked this stranger who this daredevil was. An unfamiliar silhouette walked along the bottom of the crater in a hovering cloud of dust. He was also surprised by such a guest. He looked like an unremarkable man, but his scar was very easy to remember. In fact, the man was surprised that he survived here. But Peter is not a weakling, just a moment, and he put his hand to the enemy's neck. The stranger was amazed at such a reaction. Afterwards, he noticed potential in him that definitely needed to be developed. This man with the scar was too strange. Finally, the hero asked him to let go of his hand and finally tell him who he was and why the hell he was here. Scar listened to him, raising his hands. He said that so be it, she would present herself to him. He stood up, put his left hand to his heart and introduced himself. His name was Quint. This hero knows how to surprise. Just as suddenly as he appeared here, he says that he has rank 3 abilities. Immediately after this, a powerful blow followed from the guy whose fist was charged with incredible strength and power. It was clear from his face that he was not very happy about such an attack from his guest. As soon as his fist came close to his face, the enemy dissipated into atoms, and again our teleporter slipped out of our hands. The strong impact was followed by a large stream of particles. This ability is great. One moment and particles began to gather into our stranger, as it turned out. With his words, he was trying to provoke his guest. Here the man with the scar does not have evil intentions, and Peter does not need to rush at him. His target here is the crystalline core in the middle of the crater, but what's so special about it? This is exactly what the guy decided to ask, who is still perplexed by what is happening here. In fact, Quint thought that he knew what kind of crystal was here. It was there for a reason. Still, he understood that Peter had recently acquired his special skills. He had nothing to answer to this. Silence reigned in the forest. Only the warm breeze straightened his hair. He compared this crystal to a strength enhancer in computer games. The man with the scar surprises. As ability holders, they must increase their rank, which is precisely the reason why they kill zombies and absorb their cores. But in this way, only the 4th stage of ability development can be achieved, says Quint. Then he gave away part of the crystalline core, which Peter looked at for a long time and could not look away. Then he began to wonder why he gave it to him, as if for a reason. What did he need? And you are smart, that's right. In the future I will need help from you, but for now it's better for you to increase your rank, said Quint. And finally, while his body was splitting into particles, he said that deities still exist in this world, and they are real. Then he disappeared, followed by a giant crystal, which crumbled into many particles and disappeared. The last phrase of the wanderer with the scar greatly struck the hero. He was puzzled. What kind of deities? What is he talking about? What is he raving about? Peter asks questions. Now he was again left completely alone with this crater and the whistling wind. Until now, he could not move away from his words. He looked at the ground and tried to imagine those gods who were spoken about more than once. He's completely crazy. What's in these bastards' heads? What kind of deities are there exactly in our world? Puzzled Peter asks himself. Almost the same thing was said by that scoundrel who called himself, and those who awakened their abilities a new milestone for humanity, the pinnacle of evolution. So if these were gods, then the end of the world was somehow connected with them. This meeting gave rise to even more questions. After much thought, blue energy began to ooze under his feet. Perhaps an enemy attack or a new ability. This radiance intensified, as if thousands of spotlights were burning in front of him, blinding him in the eyes. There were thunderclaps all around. An incredible burst of energy appeared out of nowhere. A strange ball appeared before his eyes, a clot of power that emitted too much light, like ball lightning. A strange crystal was floating in the sky. It couldn't be if it came from the core that Quint took. Again, something unfamiliar to Peter. He can't even imagine why this ball appeared here. This crystal chose our hero, since it flew towards him almost with lightning speed as soon as it came across him. The pebble went straight into the boy's chest with a whistle. He didn't even dare to expect that this would happen to him. After that, he was all aflame. Power, strength, and energy overwhelmed him. Could it be that he himself would soon become a deity? Then he flew up. A large whirlwind appeared around him. The earth swirled in a dance with other debris. Help came for the hero. Lena and Carl rushed to visit their arrogant brother. Maybe they could work miracles. As soon as they arrived here, everything was shrouded in mystery. A strange fog appeared out of nowhere and interfered with their search. According to Brother Carl, the weather should be sunny, but where the fog came from remained a mystery. The sister is here not only for the search, she also needs to knock on the impudent Peter. But apparently here he is. The heroine immediately noticed him and drew attention to him. Here is a brilliant smile that just wants to pierce this wanderer's skull with this club. The first blow to this man followed. How would he react to this? Well, this is not Peter at all, but a vile dead man who has already devoured the girl with his gaze. She was very scared and did not expect that this silhouette would turn out to be another monster. She didn't even think. She used her abilities and tied him with a vine so that he wouldn't dare move again. Now she's not so scared. The enemy has been neutralized. What a great fellow our Lena is. Finally, Brother Carl came up and tapped the cutie on the shoulder. The tearful heroine continued to shake with fear. That blow to the shoulder was painful for her. Carl asked her not to be so loud. Then a strange silhouette appeared in the fog, which she immediately noticed. She asked Carl about the wanderer who wanders around like a ghost. Is it him? Lena asks. Carl was already beginning to lose hope that the girl would finally stop talking nonsense, saying that there couldn't be ghosts here. But the silhouette with a blue aura was approaching them. He didn't even take a step to the side, just in their direction. Bella became even more scared. She already realized that she would be waiting. They needed to run, but her brother stood his ground. But this aura continued to approach. It did not respond to screams, but did not stop moving. In that fog, suddenly the silhouette began to blur, like an oil painting in the rain. Lena tried with all her might to shout to her brother, but he had nothing to answer. As soon as the silhouette disappeared into the ground nearby, a large beam struck, as if many peals of thunder were hitting one place. The heroine could no longer find an answer to anything. She hoped that Brother Carl knew the reason and asked him about it. You can understand him. He himself doesn't know a lot about this world. But here there are giant explosions that you can get closer to. Finally, he told her to return home, and he would check this explosion himself. But Lena did not want to go anywhere. Carl told her that she obeyed him, but the capricious girl did not want to tolerate this at all. It's immediately clear from her face that she won't sit still here. It's not for nothing that she began to use her abilities. As expected, she used her skills to manipulate the roots of the tree. She then straddled the roots of the tree and asked Carl to slow down. The boy immediately noticed something was wrong when he realized that Lena was chasing him towards the explosion. So they arrived in time. The heroine also spectacularly arrived at the place. Only the landing was not at all soft. Still, he asked her to go back, but she disobeyed and followed. She had a reason for this after all. It's dangerous here. The more people, the better. Only they didn't have time. Scared, Lena looked ahead and told Carl to see it too. Meanwhile, our hero was levitating in a strange sphere that exuded a lot of energy. It was as if that same crystal had imprisoned him. He could not wake up. This power enveloped him. Carl was worried about his brother, shouting at him. He tried to find out if everything was okay with him, but he didn't get an answer. He could not stand it, clenched his power into a fist, prepared himself for his strongest blow, and directed all this power at the sphere. This blow was incredibly powerful, but the ball didn't even crack. There was no reaction at all. It was as if he was pushed away from him. Such anomalies filled him with horror. What would happen to his brother? How was she there? Was he still alive? He couldn't understand anything. The blow was incredibly powerful, but he didn't do anything. Then the crystal cracked and broke into pieces. Was it all over? Was Peter finally going to wake up? Previously, he did not even dare to move, but now all this was followed by some signs of life. What is going on here? His clear eyes began to shine with blue fire. There were more and more mysteries. The giant ball began to dissipate, the energy began to fade, and the zombie killer finally rose to his feet. During this time, something incredibly strange happened. The same power flowed from him as from the crystal, and his gaze, there was nothing even to say. Only now our boy was already at home. After these events, he lost consciousness and woke up here. Apparently, he was dragged by Carl and Bella, who brought him to a house where it was safer. So he woke up. His gaze was as clear as before. Not what it was after all the spheres. The sister immediately noticed how Peter opened his eyes and was clearly very happy about it. It turns out that our hero lay in bed for a whole day, scaring everyone to death. They scolded him for going so far when he had not recovered. He wanted with all his might to find out what happened then, how he ended up here. There were so many questions and no answers. The sister answered him that they should ask him how he ended up being absorbed by the blue light and how he got into this giant ball. And again, this radiance in his eyes, he didn't understand anything anyway. And here is such news. As soon as he looked at Lena, he learned literally everything about her, all her abilities, stage of development, and what power she has, even how much she needs before the next stage. He was puzzled by the fact that, looking at his loved ones, he saw strange flags with their abilities. He decided to touch them and find out what was going on here, why he sees all their strengths. As soon as he looked at Mother Anna, he saw her skills, her age, how many crystal cores were needed before the new stage. He saw the same thing on his brother. It was clear from them that he did not understand his behavior. If we believe the information from his eyes, then higher stages require high-rank cores, but if not, then nothing is known. Even if he has a crystal core now, he cannot use it at the moment. From time to time, he realizes the harsh truth that he will have to become stronger, since they will come soon. Suddenly, the father approached the bed and ordered the boy to get up already. Only this brother didn't realize that his dad was doing something to him. What happened? Peter asked. But Daddy Alan is tired of watching his son soar in the clouds. He only just woke up and is still sleeping. And here are the abilities of the father who did not even awaken them. As it turned out, he will have gigantism, with a high chance of awakening. Finally, he stood up and said that so be it, he would get up. But in the depths of his soul, he was pleasantly surprised that he saw unawakened abilities. The hero was clearly out of sorts, as if he had gotten off on the wrong foot. So Lena asked where he was going, and he reluctantly replied that he would go out into the yard. He left, but the others couldn't squeeze out a word. No one was happy with his behavior. The sister did not understand at all why they waited with such diligence for him to wake up. Carl understood that brother Peter looked like he was thinking about something for a long time, so he shouldn't be disturbed. Meanwhile, Bella was carrying a plate with all sorts of goodies. It was immediately clear from it that she was glad that her beloved Peter had woken up. But she had just prepared dinner. What a coincidence. The hero is hungry as a wolf and will only be happy with home cooking. These two are just happy to see how that couple is having a nice chat together in the yard. But the truth is, as soon as they turn away, Peter is already with his beloved Bella. And the father can see that his son is worried because he doesn't have a girlfriend, while his brother and the girl are hanging out. Lena also added that Carl often took friends, but never girls. Meanwhile, Peter had already dined, and only crumbs and scraps remained from the food on his plate. Afterwards, he asked his all-seeing friend if she had seen Louise, how far away he could be. She replied that she had not seen their enemy for a long time, especially since Carl also went out to search, but to no avail. Then the heroine again noticed that Peter was thinking about something. She was upset by his gloomy appearance. And finally, she asked him this question: why is he so gloomy? It's not good at all. Well, he doesn't look like himself. Then she remembered when they were attacked by zombies. Everyone was in complete horror, but only you remained calm. In those moments, it seemed to her that he was capable of overcoming any obstacles, reaching any heights, literally capable of anything. And even if an enemy of any strength stands in front of his nose, the boy will cope with everyone. How sweet! She sincerely said that he could tell her everything that bothered him so much. After all, they were one big family. Peter was very touched by these words, especially since she included herself in their family. This will be a minute of silence before great embarrassment. Then she realized that she had said everything possible and began to try to get away from her words, but her excitement did not allow it. She and Peter are so close, or rather, no, she said with a face full of embarrassment. The hero understood everything well and was happy with all her words. No matter what she told him, he would always understand her. However, he also knew that those on the balcony were looking at this couple all this time, and they needed to talk. This puzzled them greatly. The trio did not say a word, looking at each other. Time passed, and they all went somewhere. While they were driving, he told everyone that they should collect zombie cores and absorb them in order to increase the stage of their abilities. All this time, he was thinking about how they could become stronger. He wanted to tell them something, but his heart wouldn't allow it. Anna was not at all calm in this situation. She didn't like what was happening here, and all because in peacetime, they could always live in harmony with each other. But after the end of the world, human nature takes over. Sometimes people trying to survive do things worse than any zombies. This is what makes us animals, says Mother Anna. It is for these reasons that they must become stronger, become more dangerous than any other danger, become more terrible than any nightmare. They need to collect resources, improve their stage of development, and increase their stock of weapons. Behind all this is the well-being of their family. Alan appreciated his son's words. It was right, says the old man. Then he continued, anyone who dares to attack them will have to choke on their blood. Time passed, and they stopped to examine the place where they were striving with such trepidation. The father asked him if this was the water farm that Peter was talking about. If there was gunpowder there, the hero confirmed his words and said that they could find something more important there. Then there was a powerful explosion in the middle of the forest. What was happening, and why there was life around when exactly they came there? Coming here, Peter didn't even dare to expect that something like this would happen. At the site of the explosion, there was a large cloud of dust, among which the silhouettes of many people were moving. These strangers turned out to be armed bandits or soldiers. One by one, they moved inside the structures towards the waterworks, to which they were not the only ones advancing. Lena also noticed them, but was surprised that there were so many of them. But the truth is that their number is amazing. It was not at all clear to Carl where they came from and what they were interested in here, what the goals of such a large-scale operation were. Then the hero suggested that these were Louise's accomplices who were engaged in the gunpowder trade, and all this leads to the fact that they are going after the same thing as our family. His words shocked them. What does this mean? They will be left without resources, and these bandits will take everything. He said that before leaving here last time, he locked the doors, but they were not afraid to spend grenades to get there, which means they know what is there, and not everyone has such information. The sister was immediately upset because she understood that they had lost a lot of resources, and Louise's bandits would take everything. Peter didn't think so. Tilting his head down, he said that it was not at all a fact that they would take everything. Lena initially thought that she would go and fight them, but there's just one catch. They have weapons on their side. Then Peter turned to Bella. What would he need from her? As it turned out, he was wondering how many zombies were now near the reservoir. She accepted the request and used an ability that set her eyes on fire with golden flames. From above, you can see how many red dots are wandering around the forest. These were zombies, only there were somehow too many of them. There were 52 zombies in total, of which 45 were ordinary and the rest were second rank. But that's not all. Among all the monsters, there is one unlike anyone else, much bigger and stronger, and on top of everything else, there's some kind of black thing in his head. Apart from Peter, the entire family had never encountered third-rank monsters before. According to Brother Peter, everything underground is filled with gunpowder, which means it will be difficult for them to fire at zombies, not to mention creatures of the third rank. The plan is that they will wait until the battle against the zombies begins with those bandits, and later they will make their move. Lena agreed with her brother, but Carl surprised everyone by the fact that it seemed to him that someone was approaching. His words made our boy worry. He immediately looked to the side and also felt something. And suddenly, behind the horizon, silhouettes of people began to appear, who, like quiet shadows, made their way into it unexpectedly. These were the same armed bandits. That large group was only part of the whole team. Immediately after Peter came the order to lie down behind cover, an emergency situation. Fortunately, he and his brother managed to hide behind the car while they were showered with hail of lead. The hero told his brother that they would have to split up to win and run in different directions. Carl said that he would lure the enemy, and his brother would strike at the right moment, do everything quickly. The enemy will not have mercy. He concentrated all his energy and ran after Carl. Both of them had an important mission. The fighter clearly did not expect this. At first, he did not even realize who he should fire at, left or right. It was for this mistake that he would pay. While he was firing at Carl, he danced in the rain of bullets and avoided each one. Now he realized that he no longer belonged here and decided to jump off the bridge to get away from the forest. But he didn't expect that danger would be waiting for him there too. Peter stepped on his heels while he tried to react. Just a couple of moments and one enemy was defeated. One touch and the mask cracked under the pressure of his hand. This trick caused the soldier to spin as if into a spinning top, and his weapon flew far and wide. One enemy was defeated. They managed to defeat him, but why was he only one? Where were his comrades? He looked for a long time at the daredevil, who alone went out to the owners of abilities. So he's defeated after everything. This soldier will have to be thoroughly interrogated, Peter said. But suddenly Carl shouts to his brother that he needs to run. A new danger was approaching. Was this fighter really just bait? Then a series of gigantic explosions followed under their feet. They did not dare to expect such a battle. There were powerful dents on the tree stems, as if they had been shot by an ancient cannon with a strong cannonball. There were also cylindrical holes on the ground, as if a large boulder had been rolled along it. There was almost nothing left of the soldier. What a pity! Now they won't be able to interrogate him. The hero did not understand at all what was happening here. There were always some strange things on their way. But the cause of those explosions, dents in trees and holes in the ground, was this harmless ball. Carl said that this is part of the ability, and you need to be careful with them. Then, a strange whistle appeared in the forest again. The same whistle that was there before the large-scale attack occurred. And so it happened. The same balls were rapidly flying towards them. There were a lot of them, and everything was on them. This ability is incredible. Literally, one ball demolishes trees in its path. No matter how resilient the owner of the ability is, he will not withstand a direct hit. One of the balls was able to hit Peter, giving him a slight scratch. Brother Carl wondered whether something had happened to Peter or not. He replied that everything was normal. Just a scratch on his hand, it would heal before the wedding. Then he asked him if he saw where the attack came from. The guy replied that all the balls were flying from different directions, and besides, the stranger shot them from a considerable distance. It amazed Peter. How it was shot, how it was from a decent distance. How is this possible, he asked. Using the analogy of a pinball machine, Carl clearly explained how the enemy's attack works. Someone shoots balls, and they become their target. and again a whistle appeared, which spoke only of one thing, a new attack and in no way unexpected. They were again surrounded by a hail of countless attacks, many shells flying straight at them, which just sowed panic. During this battle, Peter realized one truth. Wherever they hid, the enemy would find them. It was only a matter of time. In the same way, he determined that they were actually shooting from a long distance, so it would not be easy for them to get close. But if they can always find them, then they too can always understand where the enemy is, the hero understood. Incredibly, someone had been spying on them from under the bushes for a long time. This silhouette would now be difficult not to notice. As it turned out, it was an ordinary zombie, which could certainly provide information to its owners. Not even a second had passed before the bloodthirsty monster was defeated by the hands of a zombie killer. For a long time, he squeezed the head of the monster, whose skull had long been cracked under animal instincts. The boy looked arrogantly at the zombies, and his head was filled with all sorts of thoughts. He wanted to understand what to do with the enemy at such a distance. Meanwhile, Carl noticed that the shelling had stopped. It cannot be that this particular zombie is the owner of the zombie, so the danger still exists. You need to be on alert. He realized that he might be right, since the real enemy could use this zombie for surveillance. The brother suggested that there could be two enemies, but in reality there could be more. Suddenly, from the side of the road, we hear the cry of Sister Lena, who called her brothers to come back quickly. And all because the armed people from the storage facility began to move, and they could notice them. Carl was shocked. How quickly time flies. They already need to hurry. Peter did not go far from the younger one, and was also amazed at the speed of those bandits. The brothers agreed and went to the car to discuss a plan for further action. After all, one cannot act at random. Meanwhile, the same enemy archers who threw balls at the heroes are now embittered for allowing them to escape. One of the villains blamed his fat partner. It was his fault that they lost them, and they were going to play for big. While his comrades scolded him, the fat man painted his lips and preened himself, saying that those handsome guys were clearly very strong. The races were able to so easily deprive them of their attack. In addition, the mustachioed devil with painted lips did not look like a villain at all, more like a small child who took his mother's cosmetics. But all this is not so important. Crescenti wondered why his comrade killed that guy. He replied that they could shift their guilt onto those two, and the death of one civilian would not incur anything at all. While they were arguing, poking each other with lipstick and a cigarette butt, some old man ordered them to stop this farce. It was the four-eyed one who showed them that they had opened the gate and they could begin. Then we were taken to the house of our beloved family. It was here that they decided to discuss everything that had happened. They all understood that no one was following them. There were no signs of surveillance. They didn't even drive a car. Lena said that they fired precisely at them, not a single miss. Fearing, she asked the question whether they could get X here too. At the same time, the hero leaned on the table and thought for a long time. He couldn't even imagine how all this happened. Now they will not be able to attack them, all because they will be busy extracting resources. This is their main goal while they are safe. But as soon as the bandits seize the vault, they will immediately come for both the hero and his family. This terrified them. How long they would have to wait. How much time they would have to become stronger. The girls were also scared, because with such a resource of gunpowder, the bandits could turn the entire village into ruins. Even the smart girl Bella was shocked by Peter's words. Even he himself did not know what a bad situation they were in. Then Lena remembered how her brother said that all the gunpowder is underground, which means they won't be able to shoot. And besides, they have a creature of the third rank there. It won't be easy for them. With such confidence, she was still very worried, since they could already kill all the zombies at the reservoir. Later, Carl added that there were no cars nearby, but among the military there could be holders of abilities who do not even need weapons to defeat zombies. It was then that Lena completely despaired. And what should they do, she asked. But Anna and Alan were ready to give up their backs if enemies were aiming at their family. All they had to do was get close, and they would recognize the wrath of their mighty father. He immediately asked his daughter to help him make weapons from gunpowder and to prepare the gunpowder itself. She didn't dare refuse. Only now Peter's head was not empty of all sorts of gloomy thoughts. He constantly thought about how in a past life the village was found a few months later, and now not even a few weeks had passed. Moreover, those military men were very well trained, which can be seen from their equipment and movements. They could also eat the cores of second-rank zombies and become stronger. But even so, they cannot sit still, and attacking now is very risky. There are too many contradictions for one guy. Then there was a sudden touch. It was Bella's hand, which at the moment worked as a sedative. She said that Peter must rely on loved ones and family, And not just on himself, it's too selfish. Just as suddenly, the radio behind them hissed. Something important had happened, and people were trying to notify everyone about it. The hero immediately heard them and told them about it. Everyone was incredibly happy about him. As it turned out, they had some kind of small incident. They were able to find a survivor. This guy who was lying on the floor reminded me of someone, as if we had seen him just recently. Peter shouted into the radio for them to tie up the prisoner first and wait for him there. The guy asked why this was necessary, but the truth is, it would be difficult to understand right away. It would take too long to explain to him. As soon as he arrives, he will tell you about all the most important things. With this information, he literally flew out of the house and told the family to stay home, and he himself would return soon. He immediately thought it could be one of the soldiers, which didn't bode well for them. It cannot be that they found them so quickly. It was for this reason that he ordered them to tie up the wanderer. They cannot let him go from here. He met his hated old love, who seemed very happy with him, and also said that they went to the hospital. He calmly told her that she was younger and didn't even pay attention, just like she had all the time up until that moment. This is the true face of this person. She makes cute faces in front of those who need it, and when she doesn't like something, this is a terrible grimace. But it doesn't matter. Peter needs to hurry to that survivor and find out more about him. The guys stood with bats and waited for the main zombie killer to take a look at this stranger. From the outside, he did not at all resemble those armed bandits who captured the reservoir. He also noticed that he doesn't look like them. He looks like someone completely different, just someone. As soon as he raised his head, a scar appeared on his face, a very familiar scar. Is it really him? The one with the scar, the puzzled Peter wondered. Yes, it was our friend Quint, the same guy who told about improvements, about crystal cores, and how he achieved the third stage of development. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. It was clear from his gaze that he was incredibly scared. A woman's scream resounded throughout the entire block, asking what this bastard could have done and who he attacked. Those ropes meant nothing to Quint. Just a second, and he got out of captivity. Peter tried to stop him, after all. They had already met before, so he wouldn't dare run away. And so it turned out, he managed to capture everyone's beloved Nika in order to keep Peter in place. Then came threats that he would kill her if the hero came even one step closer to him. Peter's friend immediately shouted, trying to calm Quint down and convince him that no harm would come to him. Of course, he didn't believe them and continued to claim that they wanted to kill him, and if they tried, he would take Nika with them. He absolutely did not care about the death of his old love. On the contrary, he said that he would kill her as soon as possible. Mr. Teleporter became very worried for this reason, thinking that they were underestimating him and he would not dare to kill. It was then that the hero said that if he had wanted, he would have killed long ago, and the same would have happened to him if they wanted him dead. To this, he has another question. For what purpose did they tie him up, even if they put him in shackles and in a stone bag? He asked him what he would do if a stranger broke into his house and posed a danger to his loved ones and family. Scar has almost ceased to doubt that they are bad guys, even completely peaceful ones. But it's true that in appearance they never look like villains, although this may make you wary. The bayonet no longer lay so confidently in his hand. On the contrary, his hands trembled. His contradictions about their normality became a dogma. Finally, he let Nika go and said that he would like to taste human food, or better yet, even noodles. And what does a person need for happiness? A plate of noodles, and Quint seemed to have conquered Everest, found an oasis after several days without water, like a cold breeze in the summer heat. The rest were very puzzled by the fact that some stranger was sitting at their table and happily devouring noodles. Carl decided to check with his brother whether it was precisely him that he met on that day of the strong explosion. The sister thought that he looked more like a ragamuffin who only eats more, but that's the way it is, so he asks his brother for more. He was greatly embarrassed by the fact that this parasite called Peter brother, but the hero decided to look at him with his new skill in order to see his characteristics. But at the same time, he realized that from that moment, Quint had changed and did not even remember him. Incredibly, earlier the man with the scar himself said that he was at the third stage of development, but here he is only at the first. He noticed it too, lied, pretended he didn't know him or lost his memory. He couldn't understand any of this. Time passed, and Quint ate another bowl of noodles, an incredible appetite. Then he thanked everyone for such a dinner, because without them he would have died of hunger, he says. He didn't care about his gratitude, but he was curious about something, if he wanted to say something. This scared him a little. What to say? The scar repeated in a trembling voice. He leaned against the back of the sofa and asked how the teleport master got to their village. What tailwind brought him here? Quint was afraid that they would not immediately believe him, but he arrived here using teleportation. One might even say he escaped and ended up here. This interested the guy. How did he escape from zombies or something? Peter asks. Exactly. These creatures were chasing me all the way, so I had to resort to teleportation. But why are you so calm? So easy to believe my words about moving, the hero said. So this is a guy from the city, not local, but it sounds true, Peter thought. For someone who is telling the truth, Quint looks too unsure, as if he is worried that he will be exposed. It was then that his close lads questioned him about what the situation was like there, whether there were military personnel, and that all the zombies were supposed to be destroyed there. Before talking about this topic, he constantly stuttered, as it was incredibly difficult to talk about. Everything in the city is very bad. As soon as zombies appeared in it, panic spread on the streets. Someone was trampled by the crowd, someone was run over by cars. He was the only one who was able to hide in a trash can, where he sat for a long time, listening only to screams and screams. The hope still lived in his head that they would come to him, take him out of here and save him. But during all this time, the whole city was filled with zombies. The police failed to cope. Many officers themselves became victims of the virus. Many people tried to defend themselves and repel the bloodthirsty creatures, but died as heroes who fought for themselves and their loved ones. There were also those who committed suicide on their own, without even starting to fight for their own future. All these details were not so interesting to Brother Peter. It was better to be brief and to the point. Quint agreed with him. As a result, his nerves were already giving in. Living on was something like a jackpot, as if for this he had to go through many lives. But he handed the hero a phone with a message that if someone wants to be saved, then he must hunt zombies and eat their crystalline cores. This message also included the fact that everyone who receives abilities will become the chosen ones of God. This again amazed the hero. In addition, he received this message only 2 days after the end of the world. When they managed to find out about it, is it really not the first time that someone, like the hero, has been in such a situation? Peter thought. It couldn't be said that Carl was happy about this, but he understood that the city already knew about the zombie cores. This surprised Quint. In such a wilderness, people really also know a lot about this information. Sister Lena decided to boast about the fact that they had all already eaten 3 pieces. It was like lightning struck him. How did they eat it? He asks. Do you really have abilities? That's it. He considers them lucky, since they are very rare. If only his people from the detachment were as lucky, says the Scar. Carl did not listen to what kind of detachment he had there, and whether he posed any danger to them. On the 3rd day of his survival, Quint decided to join a detachment that at that time numbered 100 people. In addition to dealing with supplies, they often went out to hunt for crystals. You know for what purpose. After 5 days of hunting, they collected the same number of small stones, and then the strongest decided to be the first to try them. Only among all the 5, only the commander survived, the rest became dead, and he buried them with his ability. The commander then led them to fight other groups for supplies, which is when he encountered another ability holder in battle, and a group battle ensued. As the battle grew fiercer, more people had to awaken their abilities, and so Quintus awakened his. Those who were not so lucky became zombies and were killed. Those who received abilities constantly fought. Thus life became more and more terrible every day. Then the man with the scar got tired of being here and he ran away from there. The zombies chased him for a long time, but his ability was his salvation. Carl was puzzled by his words, because he understood that people with abilities were fighting each other for supplies. And his sister added that after hearing what she had heard, she wanted to stay in the village. It was calmer here. That's right, said the impudent Quint, rocking on his chair. It's quiet and calm here, and the zombies don't bother you. And there is food, which is the most important thing. So be it, he says. I'm staying here. The others were not at all happy about such a tenant. Then the desperate hero looked down and said that it was not so calm here either. Here he became a little upset and began to worry that it was not so calm here. At the same moment, Peter answered him, Lately they have not been calm here, so you will have conditions. You must help us. Meanwhile, Bella was doing business in the yard and asked if they were done asking the man. That's right, the hero answered, and added that Quint will stay here for a short time and will help in any way he can. He scratched the back of his head, thanked everyone for lunch, and introduced himself. Hello, my name is Quint. Everyone smiled at him and greeted the new tenant in unison. My name is Bella, and I am the eldest here, Alan. I am Anna, the wife of the eldest. He bowed in front of everyone and thanked again. Thank you, Sister Bella, Mrs. Anna and Uncle Alan. The heroine and the eldest were very surprised at how he called everyone here, but everyone received a new nickname. It was then that his sister Lena egged him on, who was surprised that a man in his 30s would call someone who was not much older than 20 that name. He was shocked. I mean, he's over 30. How is this possible? Our hero with the scar asks them all, he just turned 18, he says. Everyone suddenly fell silent. But the truth is, how can he be 18? If Peter himself, with his vision, saw his age, he is, if anything, 28 years old. Lena was so scared, she would never have believed that such an old man was 18. But it couldn't be. Then Quint, upset by his appearance, fell to his knees and said that he might look a little older than his age. But he was not lying to anyone. He was silent for a while, but still said, Okay, I believe you, although I myself saw the true age. Then an old man with a scar came running to him on his knees and said that he looked very callous and cold. He even thought that there would be a lot of problems with him. But in fact, behind this, he was a shell of a kind soul. Of course, the strange thing is that he himself looked at his entire characteristics and was very surprised at his age. Well, okay, they shouldn't care about this. Time is short, so they need to go. He immediately asked where they were going. The hero began to wonder if he really decided to test him, saying that he would find out later. He judged it entirely by his behavior, and therefore there were only two outcomes. Either something really happened to him, or he was faking it too well. Suddenly, the hero was stopped by his beloved Bella, who was very impatiently bringing him something wrapped in cloth. He seemed pleasantly surprised that his ladylove was bringing him a gift. There was some kind of weapon in the fabric, which she found and immediately realized that it would best suit Peter. So I brought it to you, and I immediately blushed. Oh, how I blushed. I was very embarrassed when I carried it. She was clearly very worried that she might not like it, but she still offered. He simply couldn't refuse it. This beautiful blade was named after a strong swordsman. She probably thought that her hero was just as great. He, of course, thanked her and appreciated the blade. After all, it was very good. Not to say that she was happy about this. She was happy as if her second birthday had arrived, as if she had reached one end of the rainbow. After all the gifts, just one, he said that he would be back soon and to call him in case of danger. Time passed. The hero and the man with the scar walked silently towards the same place, and Quint suddenly asked about it. Peter answered him that he himself must find out this place. They are going to find a crystalline core near the mountains. He was shocked by this, why it was so far away but there was no way by car, asks the puzzled Quint. The hero does not need anything if Mr. Teleport is always at hand, who will take them there himself. As it turned out, he had never tried to move someone else besides himself. Well, for the young man it was a great opportunity to try. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Let's go." He could no longer refuse him, and said that he would do it since he was so confident in him. Just a second, they crumbled into many particles and disappeared from the village. After moving, they ended up on the roof of one of the high-rise buildings, which can be counted on one hand. Peter was already standing on the roof while Quint hung in his arms. He was the only one unlucky. As soon as the effect of the ability ceased, Old Man Quint hung above a large height and began shouting to the entire village. Instantly, the hero determined that they were in the north of the village, and meanwhile the Scar asked him to first lift him to the roof. He didn't want to pay attention to his partner, but after analyzing, he realized that they had moved about 3 kilometers. They were still very far away, so Peter ordered his partner to move on. As it turns out, it tests his abilities, so they will continue until his strength leaves. Here he did not dare to refuse and, with some kind of favor, agreed with him to continue the check. The next teleportation was followed by a loud scream that woke up every living thing in the forest. The hero asked him to stop screaming for no reason. The old man answered him by saying that he had never tried permanent teleportation with someone else. But he didn't care about all the whining and drooling. They needed to hurry, but he had already repeated this several times. "Well, no," he said, then asked, "You can't even give me time to rest." And again he repeated, "They don't have much time, so let's continue." Well, he's not a talkative person. The man was almost at his limit. He could not contradict him, since he had no rights in his house. A little more time passed, and finally they came to the very place where the crystal lay. For all the teleportations, he spent all his physical strength and energy. Finally, he asked if they had arrived. The hero replied that yes, they were there. From his analysis, he determined that his ability was not that good and even bad. He did not like such harsh criticism of his powers after all. The ability is very good. Then he explained his words by saying that the main thing about his strength is that he can control accuracy, and this is only possible within a radius of 100 meters. And besides, he spends almost all his physical energy, so he won't be able to fight teleportation for a long time. He laughed and said that it wasn't that bad, even very good, so he was pleased with his result. And suddenly Peter screamed. He wanted the old man to stop behaving like that. What happened? From the outside, he was like the devil who is interrogating the deceased in order to send him to hell, telling him not to pretend. He was instantly frightened by his new comrade. He did not understand at all what he had done. Peter was not acting strange. He initially wanted to take him away from the family in order to reveal whether Quint was faking it or not. He was clearly tired of watching how this bastard behaved, since they had already met before, and he came to his family as if out of spite. He didn't understand at all what his new comrade meant. How could they have met before if all this time he was just trying to survive? But no one here will listen to him, and there will be no way to escape. The angry hero is already striking. Amazingly, the air around was shaking with such force, it literally cut the air. But Quint was able to escape from the instant attack, continuing to not understand anything. Is he really serious about behaving this way? The Scar wonders. Somehow, he did not behave at all like a villain, like the same Quint who suddenly found himself between the hero and the crystalline core. Standing in front of him was like an ordinary person. Nothing unusual. He did not show his true strength. Who is he? What happened to him? Or maybe someone did this to him, Peter asks himself. Maybe then he met a completely different Quint, a different person, whether it was a second person or someone else. Suddenly, the man with the scar stopped and shouted at his brother to stop chasing him. Then he became really scary. Just like that day, he says he was never afraid of battle, especially not of some kid. This Quint began to scare him. He probably reminded him of that arrogant man with the scar. As soon as he continued to act like a child, he decided to attack Peter with his incredibly slow jump. But he didn't have a chance. It only took a moment for the hero to completely escape the attack. It was a shame to even win such a battle. The old man threw himself face down into the ground, thereby losing. He had hope for a good battle, but he decided to remain silent because, well, he had nothing to say. This eccentric lay in a cloud of dust and didn't even think about getting up, as he was in a lot of pain. The boy approached him and praised him for not running away like a coward, but continuing to fight. No matter how weak he is, he will be very good for help. Commendable. Quint finally got to his feet, saying that he was not happy. They had been checking him for half a day and couldn't trust him. The old man had completely lost hope that he would survive, since the hero behaved as if he would kill every living thing on the way. But all the work is not finished yet. Come back, we will call the others for one job. Time passed and everyone was gathered. Nothing was visible in the middle of the forest due to the gloomy night. As it turned out, they arrived at the reservoir to make up for lost time, to fight back again. The hero announced to his comrades that everyone must act according to the plan that they had all discussed. First they will come, he himself, Brother Carl, and the old man with the scar Quint, who will attack everyone. Mother Anna will stay with her sister Bella to constantly be in touch. Meanwhile, the old man cannot believe that they are attacking at such a moment when they will all be on alert. But the hero told the real truth. These people will be ready to do anything for the sake of these resources. Peter immediately invited Quint to leave from here. If he, of course, so desired, he replied that he was not chickening out. He was just worried about the others. Carl said that they had already discussed everything. They couldn't go back. It was too late. Still, he was worried. But just a little. He wouldn't have dared to refuse. Everything would be against him. Then we were transported a couple of hours before the current events. At the same time, Peter suggested that everyone attack the vault in the evening, which my father did not like. Now they will not attack the enemy's forehead. Another plan, they will attack secretly at the weakest point. This surprised Alan, since his son had previously gone into battle without thinking, but then he developed something ingenious. In this case, they will simply take away all the necessary resources and will not attract unnecessary attention that they do not need. Moreover, they will not be able to attack them if there is not enough gunpowder, and they will not be able to cope with it. Only Carl was interested in one thing, how they would get in unnoticed with reinforced security, and even if they got in, how they would get everything out. He agrees with his brother's words. After all, he's right. It won't be easy, but if you come up with something, you can move mountains. And Quint will help them with this with his incredible penetrating ability. While everyone was discussing the details of the plan, he ate and panicked because he didn't want to fight anyone. Then Peter swore that under no circumstances would he allow anything to happen to their new partner. Carl and he would always help. At that moment, he realized that he was so worried that he had agreed to everything so easily, and now he regretted that his calm life had passed him by. Let's get to the point. Bella gave Peter a walkie-talkie so that they could always get in touch and ask for help. At that very moment, he asked her if she could see on her own what was happening at the reservoir. Doing such a favor for her would never be a problem, especially for Peter. As she noticed, the warehouse was much calmer than before. Still the same creature of the third rank and a little of the second. Truth after truth, he said that the enemy had begun to act, which means they should not hesitate. After all, the future is now at stake. He leaves all responsibility for Bella to Mother Anna, who promises to protect the girl even from the wind. With such a mother, they don't have to worry, she said. Go ahead and don't expect anything. Mother gave the trio confidence and they quickly went to the scene of events. Meanwhile, there was only one armed guard at the entrance, who carefully watched every rustle. Carl noticed that there were no people at all. Peter assumed that they were all underground. You couldn't relax at all, and asked Bella's beloved where the zombies were. According to her report, The third rank was in the southeast. The rest of the second ranks were right in the middle. This was a great opportunity for them, since the northwest was completely clear and the bandits were busy defending themselves. Afterwards, he told his brother that with the scar they would go first, and he himself should stay here for a while. Then he approached the old man to point out to him the factory part of the storage facility, and they needed 10 meters lower. There were no longer any problems for the hero. Everything would be done in that very second. And so it turned out he did not hesitate, and the situation became too convenient for them. Quint is a real good guy, she hit the bullseye, but his habit of screaming after the teleport remained unchanged. As soon as he managed to shut the old man's mouth, he did so as not to create unnecessary noise. He covered his mouth with his finger and told him not to make any noise, not making a rustle. He himself realized that he was in enemy territory and immediately fell silent in deathly silence, as if he had found himself in a cemetery. Looking at the situation from the outside, Peter realized that they arrived just in time. The bandits had not yet reached here. There was just one thing that haunted the old man, as if he had met the strongest zombie. And the fault is that there was no gunpowder there at all. There were cannons. Even better. Meanwhile, the night was in full swing. The moon illuminated the path for bloodthirsty zombies and foreshadowed the best outcome for the heroes. At that very moment, Carl began to worry because he had not heard from his comrades for a long time. Perhaps something had happened. Only the same light began to appear near him as during Quintus's teleports. After all, our heroes returned with a big catch and decided to show off what they brought. The brother looked with great interest into the depths of the boxes, which should be overflowing with weapons. Not only guns, the boy said, but also medicines, resources, weapons, and gunpowder. It's not for nothing that those bandits fight so much for such and such a treasure. Immediately after the first call, Peter suggested that they clean out the entire warehouse before anyone noticed them. Carl was tired of sitting still, and he said that he would go with them, and this was not discussed. The man with the scar did not disagree with his words for a minute, instantly agreeing with the proposals. By that time, the enemies had almost arrived to them. No one here would hesitate, not even the enemy. Some monsters destroyed the creatures one by one, their heads spread across the floor and walls. These were the same holders of abilities who attacked the brothers in the forest. After killing one monster, even more zombies of the second rank came running to the noise. Only initially, they did not have a chance against such strong holders of abilities. The fat man swallowed drool until his comrade was almost devoured by some creature, but did not twitch. Still, he realized that there were too many zombies, and they were all of second rank. It was not so easy with them. Someone crushed the head of one of the creatures and said that this was even better. This way, killing monsters is much better than catching them one by one and wasting a lot of time on it. The two were a little upset that they had never met the third rank. The fat man even wanted to tame him, but the old man was sure that if such a monster met them, then only one outcome awaited them. And waiting for them, the strange old man said gloomily, "Only death will await you." This horrified the guys. They didn't even dare to think that such an expert didn't believe in their strength. And then suddenly, a gigantic explosion thundered across the entire storage facility, which alerted everyone. What a horror! One of the guys was bitten by a zombie. He was so scared, he was bleeding all over. He begged for help with all his might and spent almost all his energy shouting to them. The brother decided not to abandon his comrade in difficult times and said that he would definitely help him. This madman decided to give away a rank 2 crystal core for absorption to test his luck. He smiled evilly and said that he could become like them or die like hundreds of others. But apparently his mind was leaving him. There was no life in him, and they didn't wait for an answer. Apparently everything was over with him. He didn't understand why this guy was afraid, why he wasn't eating this crystal. You can become the chosen one of God himself, become godlike, ascend to heaven, why don't you eat? Asks the madman. Only before he had time to adjust his almost dead comrade in his own way, a bullet flew in front of his temple. This bullet was completely aimed at that guy. Someone decided not to give him a chance to escape. This guy fired his bullet to stop the horror that this mutated freak with balls had created. The man was not at all happy with these words. He asked to repeat the words that this daredevil said. He pointed the gun and asked if he really wanted to hear these words again. Later he said, "So listen, get out of here, you mutated freak." The man was furious. It was clear from him that he was ready to kill him and directly told him about it. The old man ordered them to stop. Would he really allow some soldier to humiliate his comrades? And the reason is clear. Cooperation is important for everyone here. No one will work for nothing. And finally, he asked the blonde if he knew what the most important value in being a leader is. And the point is that you can always cut off branches that have not grown the way the leader needed, hinting at them. The old man approached the employee and asked him to give an order to his people so that they would follow the shots. the smell of sulfur had already appeared. The commander did not break down in front of him. Among that strange trio, he treated the old man better than anyone. Then came orders for the soldiers to take knives and shoot only when ordered. Enough time has passed that the warehouse is empty of most supplies. Peter was clearly glad that they were able to take all this, and added that with this, they could arm the whole family to the teeth. Carl was much more shocked that they had taken away so many useful things so easily and smoothly. It would not leave them behind for a long time. He touched Quint and asked if everything was okay with him, if they could continue to move. Everything was fine, but it was a little tiring to carry so much stuff at once, so I ran out of strength. Carl asked if they had the opportunity to take a break or catch their breath. Unfortunately, they have very little time. The zombies won't detain those people for long, so they need to hurry. Later, he added that they needed to bring some more medicine. This would be the last call. Nevertheless, he decided, and gathered his strength to take all the treasures of this place. In this case, they disappeared with some kind of heaviness. There was no face on Quintus. Would everything be so good? Everyone stood confidently, but the old man with the scar could barely stand on his feet. His head drooped, as if he would faint. Further, the brothers did not pay attention to the condition of their comrade, while they discussed how they would load the remaining supplies and then burn the warehouse to hell. Quint found it harder to keep on his feet, but not this. Everything led exactly to one thing. His powers were not endless, and he, of course, fell with a roar. The boys heard a rumble behind them, their last key to salvation falling before their eyes. Carl realized that the old man fell from fatigue. He already had no strength, and then they became greedy. They realized that their partner could not yet use his abilities so often, but for now, they needed to take him to a safe place. The main danger was approaching them. At the entrance, one could see the silhouettes of a crowd of people heading here. In front was the very trio that should be the most dangerous among all the military. The guys managed to notice the uninvited guests who arrived at the most inconvenient moment. These people explored with great interest the surroundings of the gigantic warehouse, which was filled to the brim with supplies. The guy couldn't understand why they didn't come here right away, why they didn't come to this warehouse. Meanwhile, the old man reminded them of the deal and its conditions, that they had to take their medicine and food. They didn't need anything more. As soon as he reminded the commander about the conditions, he immediately began to smile evilly, as if this deal meant nothing to him. That's right. They initially decided to betray the employees. The old man was the first one she put lead into, but his head reacted strangely to it. The sniper was initially waiting for a good moment to deliver the decisive blow and cut off the heads of the unfortunate mutants. In appearance, one could say that they did not expect a setup from them. It was this guy who was truly scared. Then they immediately pinned him to the floor, where he stopped moving completely. It was not for nothing that Peter called those military professionals. They didn't forget the fat man either. A bullet also hit him and wounded him right in the stomach, the most painful place. All of them were defeated, but they themselves did not want to start conflicts out of nowhere. They even somehow felt sorry for them. And so the commander inserted a couple of his words about how pitiful these people chosen by God look. Where is their strength, power, might, and authority? Where have they all gone? Did they really think that the military would really share supplies? They look like volunteers who are for any battle, the man asks. He poked him with his pistol and said that their abilities do not make them gods. They also do not represent anything. In this world, only those who have the greatest power in their hands will receive everything. And what do you have at hand, mutated freaks? His words were followed by a terrible laugh. This guy began to laugh like a crazy villain. The commander was puzzled. He did not understand what was funny about his story, why he was in such a situation and laughing at his words. What was wrong? Where he miscalculated. But he miscalculated when he lived in the last century. Now it's like the end of the world, unless he forgot, of course, and in such times no power has weight. It means nothing. The world is now ruled by power, incredible power, the strongest, the most powerful. People will walk under it. And after these words, an old man appeared behind the commander, who seemed to have risen from the dead. He then tried to shoot him with a pistol, although he had just recently been shot with a high-caliber rifle that should have turned his brains to mush. And so it turned out, not a single bullet did any damage. They all met the old man but passed by. This useless lead seemed to push his wrinkles apart. Each collision with it turned him into fog. The commander was completely frightened by this monster. He called it a monster that cannot be defeated in one's right mind. The others were also shocked by this force. The commander ordered them to fire from all guns, but would it help them? Although they had nothing to hope for, initially someone planned such an outcome, and someone shot every soldier. This was the same victim who turned out to be a zombie and fell under the control of a fat, handsome man. What will the commander do now? It must be unfortunate to die at the hands of a comrade, whom the commander himself killed with a pistol from his own hands.